I would like to first bring you to our keynote speaker for the afternoon to set the scene for the discussions. This is a welcome to Harald Buijtendijk, who is from Breda University of Applied Sciences. And Harald is here to talk about climate risk, tourism vulnerabilities, and resilience. Hello, Harald. Harald, you are on mute. Hello, Harald.
Good afternoon, Ben. Hi.
Hi. The floor is yours, Harald. Please go ahead. I'll put you on to the next slide.
Thank you. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear people, wherever you are in the world. For the next 17 minutes or so, I will tell you something about climate risk, tourism, vulnerabilities, and resilience. I hope you're having a pleasant day and enjoying this event. So my name is Harald Buijtendijk. I'm a senior researcher and lecturer at the Center for Sustainability, Tourism and Transport at Breda University of Applied Sciences, the Netherlands. And here we study the interrelation between tourism, tourism transport, and global heating. My main research focus is climate risks and climate obstruction in tourism. And most of what I will be talking about today deals with the topic of climate risk. But as tourism is an increasingly emission-intensive industry and therefore susceptible to powerful fossil fuel industry interests, some of what I will say also touches on the topic of climate obstruction.
Harald, can I just briefly butt in here? Could we see you at all? Can you put your video on?
Yeah, let me have a go at that. Thank you, Ben. Let me see, one moment.
Wonderful. Hello, Harald.
Hello.
Lovely to see you.
It's better, huh? Yeah. Okay, I will continue then. Before I begin, I would like to thank Travel Foundation, Travelist, and UN Tourism for the invitation to speak here today. They asked me to talk about climate risks, tourism vulnerabilities, and resilience, and discuss three questions. How are climate risks reshaping destinations? Which aspects of tourism are most at risk? And what strategies can build greater resilience? So that's quite a lot of ground for us to cover in a short amount of time. And there are quite some buzzwords involved. Words that are fashionable because they are used a lot, while little attention is paid to their meaning. Hence, I felt we could do with some wisdom. So I turned to Confucius, the famous Chinese philosopher who concerned himself with the responsibility of rulers to lead by virtue. And one of his teachings was this: the beginning of wisdom is to call things by their proper name. And I will keep this in mind. So my talk will consist of three parts, with each part addressing one of the questions. But before I begin, it's important to look at the bigger picture. Today, we are essentially talking about climate action. So strategies and efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adjust to the impact of global heating. And we cannot talk about climate action without talking about climate justice and tourism. And according to the recent introductory guide on this topic, published by the Travel Foundation, climate injustice happens when climate action or inaction negatively impacts those least responsible for greenhouse gas emissions, who are often also the communities most vulnerable to the impact of global heating. Climate injustice often further deepens existing inequities along lines of geography, race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, and intergenerationality. So when it comes to climate injustice and tourism, two things are clear to all of us here, I think. First, there is the climate injustice in tourism. Wealthy former colonial powers in the global north have made a greater historical contribution to global greenhouse gas emissions and global heating than the former colonized countries in the global south. Many people in the global south as well as low income and disadvantaged people in the global north, will face the biggest challenge of adapting to the impacts of global heating. And many global north countries, home to relatively wealthy aging populations, remain important outbound leisure tourism markets. Many global south countries have become economically dependent on tourism. And second, there is the climate injustice of tourism itself. A small, affluent part of the world's population is responsible for the bulk of global tourism emissions. So with this in mind, I would like to turn to the first question and address that. And that question is, how are climate risks reshaping destinations? The IPCC defines climate risk as the potential for adverse consequences from climate change impact and climate change responses on people, economy, and nature. In the context of tourism destinations, we can make a distinction between physical risk and transition risk. Physical risks are potential direct impacts of climate change on people, economy, and nature. Physical risks result from chronic or incidental, natural, weather-related phenomena caused or strengthened by global heating. These weather-related phenomena are commonly referred to as hazards. Some examples relevant for tourism: temperature rise, heat waves, wildfires, flooding, drought, sea level rise, extreme weather events, and ocean acidification. So, how are physical risks reshaping tourism destinations? Hazards cause economic and human losses. Human losses means fatalities, affected, injured, and homeless people in all countries of the world. What does physical risk practically mean for tourism in a given country or region? Now I will give you a list. First, it means potential impacts of different hazards on natural and cultural assets in mountain destinations, coastal destinations, island destinations, rural destinations, and urban destinations. It means potential damage to critical infrastructure. Think about energy supply, think about roads, think about air transport infrastructure, and telecommunications. It means potential damage to commercial real estate relevant for tourism. You can think about hotels, restaurants, shopping malls. And also the related insurability issues. High-risk areas become uninsurable as risk to commercial real estate is likely underpriced by the market. It also means potential impact on food supply, affecting agricultural capacity, food import dependency, and malnutrition. It means potential impact on public health, including fatalities from climate change-induced diseases and vector-borne diseases. It means potential impact on freshwater supply, affecting access to reliable drinking water. And all of this combined puts pressure on a country or region's climate change adaptation readiness, which is the economic, governance, and social capacity to implement climate action. Now I'm turning to transition risk. Transition risk originates from the potential for climate change responses not achieving the intended objectives. Transition risk is about risk associated with transition to a low-carbon economy. If realized, transition risks can lead to stranded assets, and stranded assets is the unanticipated devaluation or write-off of assets. Now, what does transition risk practically mean for tourism in a country or region? Transition risk originates from the progress of a country's energy system towards net zero emissions by 2050. Transition risk originates from the influence of global heating on international arrivals in a country or region. So this is kind of a marketing issue, and it includes both push and pull factors. And last but not least, transition risk originates from tourism greenhouse gas emissions, particularly related to the share of emission-intensive transport and the distance between destinations and their main source markets. So how are physical and transition risks reshaping tourism destinations? To answer the question, Recent research assessing tourism demand and destination development under global heating indicates that, for the time being, it is too early to project tourism losses and gains from changes in climate. However, tourism operating costs, and with that the travel costs of people, will go up. In other words, tourism operating cost changes, rather than the impact of global heating-induced hazards, will likely affect tourism demand and drive behavior change in tourism in the near future. Thus, in general, it can be concluded that at the very least, tourism operating costs will go up, affecting risk-prone destinations catering to more budget-sensitive markets first. Based on all this, turning to the second question, it is possible to dissect a risk profile of some kind and address the second question. So which aspects of tourism are most at risk? In general terms, the most vulnerable destinations are destinations located in hazard-prone regions or countries that have limited climate change adaptation capacity, that rely for a large part on fossil fuels to operate their tourism sector, and that depend on source markets requiring carbon-intensive transport modes over longer distances. The least vulnerable destinations are destinations in countries or regions with a lower hazard exposure, that have considerable climate change adaptation capacity, that can attract most of their tourists from nearby regional markets using low carbon transport modes. Still, regardless of this difference, and this is important, effective climate risk management involves political decision-making in specific contexts. And this is because climate change impacts and climate change responses can have both beneficial and adverse consequences, depending on the nature of the affected system, the magnitude of change, and values and objectives of different actors. With this conclusion in mind, the aspects of tourism that are most at risk have become clear, the places tourism relies on. This, I think, hardly comes as a surprise here. It is something we all know and understand. Therefore, a slightly rephrased, and in my view, more relevant follow-up question is the following: what aspects of tourism put tourism most at risk? Scientific studies and industry reports, each using different parameters, show that tourism emissions have been growing much faster than the total emissions of the global economy in the decade up to the corona pandemic, contributing approximately 8 to 10% of global emissions in 2019. The Tourism Panel on Climate Change concludes that tourism will not meet the net zero targets that have been set. Instead, tourism emissions will continue to grow as other sectors decarbonize. At the same time, the tourism sector's response to global heating over the last 2 decades has been clearly insufficient. Over the past 2 decades, there have been several high-level voluntary climate action declarations in tourism, with the Glasgow Declaration and the Baku Declaration being the most recent ones. But recent research looking into the outcomes of these pledges find limited to no meaningful progress. And as long as there is no tangible climate action in tourism, climate injustice in tourism and the climate injustice of tourism will persist and will likely deepen as global heating intensifies over the next years. And this brings us to the final question. What tourism strategies can build greater resilience? We learn from scientists that it is crucial for tourism to mobilize effective, evidence-based, just, and sustainable climate solutions. Such efforts, they argue, must include a comprehensive analysis of climate risk. And this has not been completed for any tourism destination until date. Destinations, they conclude, should therefore engage in comprehensive risk assessment and adaptation planning and investment. A tool that can guide destinations conducting such an assessment is Destination Risk Scan. At Breda University of Applied Sciences, we are currently developing this tool in partnership with the European Tourism Futures Institute the Center of Expertise, Leisure, Tourism and Hospitality, the Travel Foundation, and Risk Layer, a specialist in risk analytics and resilience management. Destination Risk Scan consists of a publicly accessible and easy-to-use online climate risk scan completed by an offline simulation game for use in resilience planning workshops. The online climate risk scan will provide destinations with an easy-to-understand report of their tourism climate risk profile. Using this risk profile as starting point, the simulation game will assist policymakers to prioritize policy actions within their own governance context, providing insights on the trade-offs that destinations face when planning for resilience. Now, this is a really great project, and I'm happy to promote it a bit here, and I'm also happy to contribute to this project. Still, techno-managerial approaches like this one, while needed and useful, are by themselves not enough to accomplish resilience. Why is that? Because they tend to reduce climate action to technological and economic challenges of mitigation and adaptation. Climate injustice in tourism and the climate injustice of tourism are often overlooked. Tourism strategies for building resilience should therefore also address climate injustice. A first step in the right direction is to avoid talking of tourism and tourism businesses as blanket terms. While it is important to stimulate individual tourism businesses to take actions in their operations, supply chains, communications, product design, and so on, we all know that the unintended byproduct of any focus on incremental change and individual business is the political suggestion that these voluntary actions are sufficient and regulation is no longer needed. This, I argue, is a highly risky frame. It's a risky frame because if we consider the current global heating trajectory and related climate risks and the state of corporate capture in the world, for example, the climate obstruction practices of the airline industry. At this point, it makes sense to revisit Confucius, who once said, "The way out is through the door. Why is it that no one will use this method?" As long as the obvious way out is ignored, resilience is just an industry buzzword. As long as resilience is about doing some incremental stuff without making the required structural changes in the pursuit of tangible and just climate action, resilience is not positive. According to the IPCC, resilience is only positive when there is capacity for adaptation, learning, and genuine transformation. So to conclude, when destination policymakers develop strategies for building resilience, they should dare to ask themselves fundamental questions. What aspects of tourism are worth keeping? And what aspects of tourism need phasing out? Does a just pursuit of resilience against global heating also require resilience against the practices of specific actors? After all, there is mounting scientific evidence that there are some specific forms of emission-intensive tourism that are driving up climate risk for destinations and turn tourism into a global driver of global heating. Destination policymakers will need to carefully assess the situation for their destination. They will need to consider both the climate injustice in tourism and the climate injustice of tourism. Rather than attempting more universal, collaborative, sector-wide voluntary declarations under the blanket of some generic tourism frame, it is arguably more just, time-efficient, and impactful to call things by their names. This means lobbying regulators to restrict the bad apples in tourism. At the same time, governments, communities, and everyone who cares about tourism should empower tourism destinations to work together at international level, even when they are each other's competitors, to transfer transition risk to the high emitters and limit the excessive influence of the bad apples in tourism. Many thanks for your attention. It was a pleasure to be here today, and I hope you all enjoy the remainder of this event. Thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you, Harald. So if you've got questions for Harald, please do put those in the chat. I'll keep one eye on that. And before we move on to the next session, I might have a question or two for you, if that's okay, Harald. One here, which is really, can you just sort of be a bit more clear, or maybe sort of the naming part of your presentation? Let's sort of be clear. I mean, what types of tourism, either destinations or types of tourism, do you think face the most urgent adaptation challenges in the next sort of 5 or 10 years, and why is that?
Yeah, what came to my mind while I was preparing this talk, Ben. I mean, I try to keep it as generic and global as possible, of course, and also I tried not to make too specific examples and bring to the front specific destinations and cases, because that would not be fair. That would not be a nice way of communicating. But I think in general terms, if you think about remote island destinations, I think there is a need for a very customized policy approach. For example, I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, which was revolving around one of these remote island destinations. So that was the topic of discussion, what they should be doing in terms of climate action, also looking at the current state of global heating. There, you cannot escape the fact that they are highly aviation dependent for getting, for example, their customers in. Although there is something they can do in terms of reducing distance, they will always remain a tourism destination relying on air transport. But air transport in this case has a clear economic benefit, and air transport in this case also can be argued to be essential for the existence of these kind of places. And I think it is important that there is a customized policy approach specifically catering to these kind of places in the world. So I hope this answers your question.
Thanks, Harald. And I mean, are there any particular types of tourism as well? I mean, so that was a focus on maybe the types of places. Are there? I think you were alluding to some of that in your presentation in terms of how we might sort of want to adapt in a way that maybe improves the shape of tourism in future. Where do you see the real kind of vulnerabilities in tourism at the moment?
That's a very good point. I mean, I'm studying mainly tourism mobilities, of course. So in my mind, it's always a mobilities discussion, more or less. But if you really talk about types of tourism, I mean, mountain tourism comes to my mind, and that means ski resorts, mountain tourism destinations, depending on specific winter sports activities that are highly seasonal and season dependent. So that would be one specific example. But I think you can also think about general beach tourism destinations in places that have always been historically season destinations, so seasonally dependent destinations, where you now see that their high season, the summer season, also becomes increasingly unattractive for tourism activities, for traditional beach tourism, because you see an increasing amount of global heating related hazards occurring. So the question is this season, this high season dependence for beach destinations, but also for mountain destinations, still sustainable? And isn't it important for them to look at alternatives in terms of how to distribute tourism over the different seasons and different tourism activities as well?
And have you seen any evidence? I mean, you mentioned things like stranded assets, and I guess the kind of connection there of investments and the risk to investment. Is there sort of any evidence at the moment that investment sort of decisions are being made based on potential climate risk?
I have no concrete evidence of it. I've seen some reports while I was preparing as well for this presentation. There is one source discussing a situation about insurability of mainly beach-related assets, so commercial assets like hotels, etc., in relation to the Caribbean tourism region. So that's where you really see this risk coming up. You see a movement of winter sport resorts moving higher and higher up into the mountains areas. You see this happening as well in France, which is not related to insurability, but it is related to the kind of investment decisions that that investors interested in this kind of business are making.
It seems sort of slightly crazy in a way that we don't have more information around that in terms of, you know, which assets are at risk of things like sea level rise and, you know, and other sort of climate impacts. Would you agree? I mean, or is that evidence out there? It's just sort of not being used, or is it just it doesn't exist?
I wouldn't say it's not used. I would also not say it's not existing. I would say it is very difficult to assess the potential of something happening in the future, because that is what we're talking about. When we're talking about risk, it's not about this will happen to you tomorrow. You know, it is about talking about this will likely happen to you tomorrow. And so it will always be, it will always have some kind of a speculative nature. If I was just reading this morning some of these recent studies done about the effects of temperature change, climate-related temperature change, and tourism demand, where it was also concluded, we do not know yet what hazards will do to tourism demand, other than that tourism will become more expensive. And that is a business risk. So that is a situation you can be sure about. I mean, a last thing to say about it, if you look at the literature on insurability of commercial real estate, there you come across statements like, findings like that saying, okay, we based on what we've reviewed, so these review articles by scientists, they say these risks are likely underpriced. That means the market is still with its head in the sand.
Great. Thank you, Harald. Before maybe one more thing before I let you go, let's try and leave on a slightly more positive note. What kind of things do you think will help to build resilience in tourism, and do you see any signs of those things beginning to happen now?
Yeah, sure, Ben. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, this is always it becomes like these it's drama talks, right? I mean, where I'm sitting in the Netherlands, it's 2 degrees, it's gray, it's been raining all day, there hasn't been any daylight, and then talk about a topic like this. So I get it. I think there is perspective, and I wouldn't use the word hopeful, but I would say, what we can be positive about is people collaborating. And I really believe that we should, shift power in tourism to destinations, have destinations empower destinations, and ensure that they get the capacity to collaborate also when they compete on these kind of issues, because it's a common interest. And I think it's very important. And I think they can learn a lot from each other. So in that sense, I would say at the destination level, there's still a lot to be gained.
And that's a great way to finish and to move on to the next session, which is looking much more destination perspectives, actually, Harald. So thank you for that. And thank you for your insights and your presentation today.
It's my pleasure, Ben. Thanks.
Okay, so next up, we do, as I say, have a session on what we're calling destination realities. So looking at how destination leaders are responding to climate challenges locally. And for this, we have Shivya Nath, who is founder of Climate Conscious Travel and a travel writer that many of you will be aware of, who I'll ask to come to the stage now, please. Just as that happens, I just would like to say that, I mean, clearly real world examples and perspectives from different regions and contexts are going to be really useful to have in these discussions. We have at the Travel Foundation just put out a report called Destination Stewardship, a guide to action on climate change. That was literally published yesterday. and that's in association with Destination Wayfinder, and we'll put a link into the chat now. And that's just because it's got over 90 real-world examples linked to 37 ideas around climate action, all connected to the Glasgow Declaration. So if you're sort of struggling to think of ideas to put in your climate action plan, struggle no more. Go and have a look at that report, and there are plenty of ideas there. Hi, Shivya, you're here, welcome to the COP sessions, and we're really looking forward to this session. And so, if all the other panelists could come now too, but I'll hand over to you, Shivya.
Thanks, Ben. I think I can get someone can help me get the video up on stage, but hello, everyone. I think Harald has set the stage really well for this panel. What we really want to do now is dig a little bit deeper into how physical and transition risks that he talked about are showing up in key regions, and then talk to destination leaders about how they are responding to them and building resilience, not just in tourism, but also in local communities. So today the timing feels perfect because we're also launching a unique resource. It's called Future-Proofing Tourism, a guide to climate adaptation and community resilience for travel businesses. If we could have the slide here, that would be great. So just a little bit of insight into this resource. I think we are all aware that no matter where we operate, climate risks are increasing. Harald has already talked about many of these risks like extreme weather, biodiversity loss, and so forth. So we conducted this research across 6 destinations in mountain, coastal, and urban terrains, and analyzed 30 case studies of tourism businesses of all shapes and sizes, from tourism operators to hotels to community-centric initiatives. And one of the key things we learned is that climate adaptation is no longer about doing good or being responsible. It will really be a survival strategy for tourism businesses going forward. When done right, climate adaptation can unlock new tourism and financial opportunities. And in some of our case studies, we found that businesses have already begun to innovatively turn conservation efforts and even affected natural assets into new tourism products. So one great example we have in the study is about Peru, where the Pastoruri Glacier was a popular hiking destination, but it has receded by more than half of its length, which has made it less attractive for hikers and in turn reduced the revenue that communities in the area earn from tourism. So in a public-private community partnership, they've reimagined this hiking trail as the route of climate change, which seeks to educate people about global warming and how it's impacting natural resources and local communities. And I think throughout today's sessions, like the sessions in the morning, we've heard constantly about the need for climate adaptation to center local communities, because many destinations, especially in the global south, that rely heavily on tourism are also the most vulnerable to climate impacts. So we are going to share the link to the report in the chat, which is co-launched today by Regenerative Travel, Climate Conscious Travel, and Aurora. And to keep it very actionable, we've distilled our findings into 10 practical climate adaptation strategies. Also, as we reviewed climate action plans and national tourism policies for this paper, we noted that the two really don't speak to each other. So even though tourism is a big contributor to the global economy, it has only recently become part of the climate conversation. So we also have recommendations in the paper for policymakers and governments on leveraging tourism as a tool for climate adaptation and adaptation finance, and working with tourism businesses to strengthen resilience in their destinations. So with that, I want to get into our panel and start by asking all of our panelists to give a short introduction of your work and tell us how climate impacts have started to show up in your destinations and how are they impacting not just tourism, but also local communities. So Dylan, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Well, Tanze, everyone, Dylan Rose Nia, Red Pheasant Ochi. Hello, my name is Dylan Rose. I'm a member of Red Pheasant Cree Nation in Treaty 6 territory in Saskatchewan. I'm currently based in Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories, otherwise known as Vancouver. And I work for Destination Canada, our country's national tourism organization. I'm the first First Nations person to ever work for this organization. My role is the Director of Destination Development and Indigenous Relations. So our role within the organization is really about creating enabling conditions for the supply side of the industry to be stewards and to drive investment. Yeah, and I guess on the second part where it's climate change is showing up in the destination, I guess I'd say we're already seeing climate change daily in ways that weren't part of our baseline a decade ago. So wildfires in places we've never had them before. We had wildfires on the opposite end of the country in Newfoundland this past summer. Extreme heat events, particularly in major cities. We've had floods and flash rainfall events that overwhelm small communities. We've had uncharacteristic cold snaps. For example, in British Columbia, we've had one of our wine regions last year experienced a 99% of crop freezing. So we had to buy grapes in the United States, and we've had entire communities being displaced. So we've had full towns in British Columbia that have literally burned to the ground because of wildfires. And obviously there's many sort of implications for tourism and communities. So operators are facing unpredictable seasons and cancellations. Communities are dealing simultaneously with safety concerns, infrastructure pressure, and economic instability. And then I'd also say that visitors' expectations are shifting as climate reliability becomes part of destination decision making. So maybe I'll leave it there and pass it over to other panelists. Thanks.
Thanks, Dylan. Thanks for setting that context. We can go over to Joaquín.
Hi, good morning. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here at COP30 representing Favela Experience and Planetera. And Favela Experience is a social tourism agency that designates collaborative tourism experience together with favelas of Rio de Janeiro and connect our visitors with local projects and community leaders who already transform their territories. Our work demonstrates that any climate debate must include those living in the places most affected by the environment crisis. And without favelas, there is not complete climate justice. And without social justice, there is not a climate transition. I come from a place where environment challenges are not abstract concepts or future projections. They are part of daily life, and this has been the case long before the world began mobilizing and prioritizing the environment. From their inception, Rio de Janeiro favelas grows driven by a combination of historical factors, lack of public housing policies, systematic urban exclusion, removal of tenements, economic growth without social planning, and rising living costs. When the state does not provide affordable housing, infrastructure, or formal access to the city, families create their own solutions. It was the negligence that pushed millions of people into informal areas, where expansion occurred without technical support and gave rise to the overpopulation we see today. Every day, the population of favela continues to grow, and the state remains absent in these territories. As there is no longer space to expand horizontally, communities bank to grow vertically. Houses and small buildings constructed on top of each other without technical studies or of poor necessity. And most of these constructions are built on hillsides, surrounded by forest, further increasing environment vulnerability. Now, I want to point you to environment problems faced by favelas. They are long-standing problems, but they worsen rapidly with uncontrolled population growth, combined with the effects of the climate change. So when I talk about waste of management in favelas, the territory influences everything. Vidigal, for example, is a favela of Rio de Janeiro built on a hillside in an area that was originally Atlantic forest. Houses occupies nearly the entire slope, and much of the circulation occurs through narrow alleys where cars cannot pass. Today, around 6,000 people live in this area, but there are only 6 official waste collection points. The numbers simply don't add up. Since many families need to walk along, distance, carrying heavy bags to reach one of these points. What happens is, in practice, the accumulation of waste in the alleys themselves, especially in the higher and hard to access areas. In addition, due to proximity to the forest, informal disposal points also upper, which end up becoming dumps and breeding grounds for disease vectors. In many cases, waste is burned for lack of viable alternative. And this is not an isolated case. Most favelas face very similar changes: high population, density narrow street, limited infrastructure, and in some cases, proximity to vegetated areas. This combination makes waste management a daily and constant challenge here. And we have other problems during the rainfalls. Large parts of Rio de Janeiro, hillside favelas was built on slopes with terrain studies, without terrain studies, engineering, drainage, or technical support. This means many homes are literally in risk areas. When torrential rains arrive, which in real summer are intense, short, and really strong, thousands of families go through a well-known ritual: sit and sound, and people run from their homes to shelter in schools, sport courts, associations, neighbor houses. And this is common, recurring, and part of the summer routine. And this is not an exaggeration. Rio has already experienced several landslides that destroyed entire homes and took lives. And with climate change, rains becomes increasingly violent, so the risk grows year after year. Furthermore, in hillside favelas, what's accumulated in alleys and forest areas is also carried away by runoff. It descends through the streets, forming real channels of debris, clogging drains, and contributing to the city drainage collapse. In the rain falling on the hills also paralyzed the entire city, which already has an insufficient river system. And in the flat areas, the problem is a little different. Here, this is the risk of, we don't have the risk of landslides, but there's a constant risk of flooding. When it rains heavily, these areas are quickly submerged. The streets, often unpaved, turn it into mud. And the water that invades homes is contaminated, mixed with sewage and debris. The consequences are immediately. So people lose furniture and appliances, homes become temporarily uninhabitable, and residents are exposed to diseases as leptospirosis, hepatitis, dengue, and other infections associated with standing water. Moreover, many of these flat favelas are in historically vulnerable areas, lowlands, near mangroves, landfills, or naturally flood-prone zones. When it rains, there is nowhere for the water to flow, so the entire territory becomes a large pool of dirty water, and none of this is isolated. It's something common for us. It's something that people here live every time, in special during the summer. And we have other problem too, the heat islands. Now let's talk about this critical problem inside the favelas. So we call heat islands because in the favelas, houses are built close together, often with multiple floors and almost not vegetation. There is not tree cover because the entire territory has been occupied by constructions. Air do not circulate. Long streets have poor ventilation, and everything is concrete, reflecting heat. According to an El País report in March of 2025, in Complexo da Maré, a favela in Rio de Janeiro received a temperature reached 60 degrees. This happens because the combination of extreme population density, absence of trees, and closely packed buildings creates an environment that retains and intensifies heat. To make matters worse, when heat arrives, tools with fans or air conditioning face another problem. The electrical grid cannot handle the demand. the networks are overloaded, and much of this is irregular and improvised. So precisely when people most need the energy to relieve the heat, the power goes out and the family suffers at homes with unbearable temperatures. And this is not just a discomfort, it poses real health risks. It exacerbates respiratory and cardiac problems, makes many people feel unwell inside their homes, and for the elderly or those who persisting health conditions, it can even be fatal. And in favelas, we have problems with transport. So if you're feeling bad, it's not so easy necessarily go to an hospital, you know? So this is really bad. Oh, sorry.
No, thank you. I didn't mean to cut you off, but just in view of time, I think it's really important to know that social realities tend to also amplify climate impacts. And I will come back to you with more follow-up questions soon. But maybe we can move on to you, Gopi, a short introduction, and if you can talk about how climate risks are showing up in your destination.
Hi, thank you, Shivya. So I've been running Blue Yonder for now, this is our 21st year. And in this 21 years, unfortunately, we ended up responding to more than 13 major disasters, all climate change related, except for the Nepal earthquake. And when I say major disaster, I'm only talking about those disasters where the destination had to bring together at least $5 billion to recover or to rebuild better. So this includes Kerala floods, this includes what happened in Cyclone Isla and Sundarbans and stuff like that. But for the media, what's interesting is like these major disasters are sexy and cool because they are fast, sudden onset disasters like big flood, crazy rains. Rather than me explaining what's happening in my home state, Kerala, where we have both sudden onset of disasters as well as slow onset of disasters, I just want to show a short video about the impacts, so that you can visualize it, you can really see it. Ben, can you show the video, please? Thank you.
ബഹുമാനപ്പെട്ട കളക്ടർ സാർ അറിയുവാൻ, ഞങ്ങളുടെ നാട്ടിലെയും എൻ്റെ വീട്ടിലെയും കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഓർമ്മിപ്പിക്കാനാണ് ഈ എഴുത്ത്. ഇപ്പോൾ കുറേ കൊല്ലമായിട്ട് ഉപ്പുവെള്ളമാണ് ഞങ്ങളുടെയൊക്കെ വീടിൻ്റെ ചുറ്റിലും. വീടൊക്കെ കേടായി. എൻ്റെ കൂട്ടുകാർ ആദിത്യൻ്റെയും അതുലിൻ്റെയും പിന്നെ ആര്യയുടെയും വീട്ടിൽ 2011 ഓരുവെള്ളം കയറാൻ തുടങ്ങിയതാ. 13 കൊല്ലമായിട്ട് അവർ ഇങ്ങനെ ജീവിക്കണേ. 15 മിനിറ്റ് വെള്ളത്തിൽ കൂടി നടന്നിട്ടാ സ്കൂളിൽ പോണേ. കാലാവസ്ഥ മാറ്റാന്നാ പറയണേ. കുറെ വീടും പോയി, ആൾക്കാർക്ക് ജോലിയും പോയി. നാരായണൻ ചേട്ടനൊക്കെ എത്ര മീൻ കിട്ടിയിരുന്നതാ, ഇപ്പൊ ഒന്നുമില്ല, തൂമ്പുപണി മാത്രമായി. ഇവിടുത്തെ മെമ്പറൊക്കെ പലതും ശ്രമിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്, പക്ഷെ ഒറ്റയ്ക്ക് എന്താവാനാ. ഞങ്ങളുടെ വാർഡിൽ കഴിഞ്ഞ 4 വർഷം ഏതു ദിവസം എത്ര മഴ പെയ്തു എന്ന് കൃത്യം ഡാറ്റ കയ്യിലുള്ള കുട്ടിയുണ്ട്. ഇങ്ങനെ നോക്കുമ്പോൾ മഴയുടെ പാറ്റേൺ മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ പറ്റും. നമ്മുടെ പ്രശ്നത്തിൻ്റെ കൃത്യം വിവരങ്ങളുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ പരിഹാരം ഉണ്ടാക്കാൻ പറ്റില്ലേ? ഇത് മുരുകേശൻ ചേട്ടൻ ലക്ഷക്കണക്കിന് കണ്ടൽ നട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആൾക്കിത് ചെയ്തിട്ട് എന്താ ലാഭം? ആള് ചെയ്യുന്നതിൻ്റെ ഗുണം ഞങ്ങൾ കുട്ടികൾക്കാണ്. കാലാവസ്ഥാ വ്യതിയാനത്തെ അതിജീവിക്കാൻ പറ്റുന്ന കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ സ്വന്തം അരിയാണ് പൊക്കാളി. അത് ഇവിടെ കൃഷി ചെയ്യാൻ ആളില്ല. എന്നാൽ വിച്ചപ്പൻ ചേട്ടൻ 12 ഏക്കറിൽ എല്ലാ കൊല്ലവും പൊക്കാളി വിളവെടുക്കും. ഇങ്ങനത്തെ വലിയ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ചെയ്യുന്ന ആളുകളെ നമ്മൾ വഴികാട്ടികളാക്കേണ്ടേ. സസ്നേഹം, ദേവനന്ദൻ.
Thanks, Gopi, for sharing that video. I think it really puts in perspective what we're facing on a destination and a community level locally. So I think something beautiful that the girl asks in the video is that we have data and that can help us find solutions. So just building up on that, can you share tools or approaches that have helped you analyze or understand climate risk at a local or community level in Kerala?
Well, one thing we realized is, like, as a tour operator, irrespective of the passion in which we work in the ground, that's the reason, like a lot of our friends and the peers in the industry, they joke about Blue Yonder being a perpetual startup. What happens is, like, we go well for 3 years and then all of a sudden there is a climate change related disaster happening. We put in all our resources into it. We get involved with the community. And then we work in all the 4 phases of disasters, like whether it's mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. We are always there with the community in all locations we work. But one thing we realized soon after the COVID is that passion is one thing, ability to work is another thing, and what you need is a science-based support system. So what Blue Yonder did was we married Blue Yonder with another science-based community modeling solution, another company called Keynote, a startup. And we co-created a company, a not-for-profit called Resilient Destination Foundation. So this foundation is like with people who are with the background of a hydrologist, behavioral energy expert. We have disaster managers, tourism guys, climatologists. This helped us a lot to understand what is happening in the ground from a completely different perspective. Otherwise, we would see like houses in a bad condition, like in a Kochi area where this video was shot. Interestingly, last week, Booking.com has featured Kochi as the top 10 destinations in the world that you should go and see in 2026. But this site that I showed you in the video is not something that not even many locals are aware of, because it's just 1 kilometer away from the fancy places of Kochi. So what the data to per se, what we started doing is, in that video, you might have seen people were making some marks on a calendar. And this was an initiative we did where we printed tens and 10,000s of calendars and distributed to the local families there, where they could on a day-to-day basis mark what is the amount of water that came on a particular time on a particular day. And after 6 months of this exercise, we collected all the information, put it on a dashboard. Now we have a clear idea about what's been happening in the 13 years and now where we are leading. So these kind of interventions. So now it's easy for someone to put some money into it, bring in some passionate cinematographers and shoot this beautiful frames and depict the stories of local people. And these people are sick and tired of people like us, like who go there, shoot everything, showcase their story. But what is the next step? So this is where the data comes so handy for us. So all the tools. So what we did, in just to talk only about this particular video and the 7 characters, we looked at all the 7 characters as 7 projects. So you saw that there was this man going in a cycle through a Pokali farm. Now, Pokali is a very unique variety of rice in the whole world because it's the only known variety which can grow in saline environment. It can grow in salt water. So right now in Kerala, we have just about farmable, roughly about 7,000 hectares of land. That is all that is remaining in 3 districts. And this is a rice that came in another flood in 1341. From the mountain, it came and it grows to 7 feet high. And then it's a symbiotic farming. It has 6 months of rice, 6 months of prawn culture. Now, interesting part, which is not really explored back home, is the fact that this is also an amazing blue carbon economy. More than 580,000 tons of carbon is there in the first 20 centimeter of soil. The carbon sequestration is normally we relate it with bamboo, with the mangrove, but this paddy system, this farming system. So we started working with the farmers, with the local cooperatives, local panchayats, or the local self-government to showcase that this could become not only a solution to a lot of food security challenges that are coming because of climate change, but also supplementary sources of income for community, so that they have that income with dignity, not as a charity, not as something because you are in crisis, oh, here is some money. No, people work towards earning that money with dignity. So multiple. So each of the 7 characters ended up becoming a project for us. And then the money that we spend, like that mangrove, when we met that volunteer, Murukeshan, he might have planted maybe about 20 or 25,000 saplings. But now, end of 4th year, we have planted altogether 275,000 saplings. Even if you take, say, 50 cents per sapling, including the livelihood cost, the wages that we need to pay, we transformed that volunteer work into a circular economy and linked it with tourism. So now we charge $30 per traveler to go for 3 hours into the mangrove. So the money that we are spending is not a charity. It is not funds that we are giving it out as a philanthropy or a CSR fund. We are looking at it as this is a product development cost. So it becomes a social business. And the community also, they are not receiving money because they are in crisis. No, they are getting money for the service they are rendering. So it's like kind of doing well and doing good, so you can do good work, but at the same time, you can sustain your business and the community interests also. So, I mean, I can give hundreds of case studies like that, but
No, thank you for sharing that. I think just the perspective that, people within the community can also become an active part of assessing risk and building solutions. I think that's where we need to be heading. So the same question to you, Dylan, like I know you've done, risk assessment work within Canada. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks for that. It's really interesting to hear the other 2 panelists because they're much more grassroots and mine is a little bit more macro, working at the national level within Canada. But in 2023, we launched a tourism corridor strategy program. So we piloted 3 cross-jurisdictional corridors across the country because, jurisdictions like to stay within their jurisdictional mandate. And we kind of wanted to find an area where we could support and add value. And it focused on sort of grassroots development, partnering with local leads to create strategies, implementation plans, and investment plans. And then after that pilot year, we took some learnings, and then we moved to another intake in 2024, 2025. And we wanted to do a climate assessment as a pilot. So for our climate work, we worked with Risk Layer, who also supported similar work in Visit California, to our neighbors to the south. And you heard the previous speaker, Harald, discuss risk scan by Risk Layer. So this year we piloted climate risk assessments for each of the corridors, and we focused on adaptation. So specifically on climate resilience roadmap and adaptation playbook. So this section is sort of complementary to our larger strategy, and each corridor strategic priority chosen by communities and partners. There's short-term 1 to 3 years and long-term 3 to 10 with actions that are aligned to climate adaptation priorities. So we wanted to ensure that climate resilience work reinforces and it didn't compete with sort of what was existing and the other work that was done within the strategies. And then to sort of articulate this work, we created a series of short videos to communicate the findings. I personally found them a bit alarmist, but when we showed them to the steering committee groups that we were working with, everybody was like, yes, this is exactly what's happening. So it really helped to make those abstract sort of projections feel real. And then the assessment identifies the corridor's sort of major climate hazards and their potential impacts, but also emerging opportunities. So we looked at like, what's it going to happen in 10, 20, 50 sort of years. So by 2070, in both scenarios, whether it be middle of the road or fossil fuel developments, it pointed to warmer annual conditions, drier summers, more wildfire smoke days, more heavy rainfall disruptions. And then I guess in the tourism space, this creates, of course, risk and competitive advantage. So extreme heat intensifies everywhere. Destinations like the corridor that I'm working on in Vancouver Island and with Washington State. That one's a bit of a unicorn because we are working in the United States, our biggest market, and our neighbors to the south. But that may attract visitors seeking more moderate climates, and then a longer sort of shoulder season may open up, which would offer opportunities for year-round products and more sort of balanced visitor flows. And just the hazard index that I was talking about earlier, we built it up from 60 indicators using data from places like Environment and Climate Change Canada. And then sort of projections based on 2 emission pathways, the middle of the road and then the fossil fuel development. So yeah, maybe I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Great, thanks for sharing, Dylan. And I think you bring up a really important point, that it's important to analyze, the risks and the impacts that are here and that are coming in order to even identify new tourism opportunities. So speaking of that, my next question is for you, Joaquín, which is that in our paper, one of our findings suggested that the most promising climate adaptation strategies are the ones that not only protect tourism assets, but also center community well-being. So in your work, how do you ensure that you are not just building, tourism resilience, but also community resilience?
Yes. For us, Favela Experience, Planetera, and Favela Inc., the solutions of these problems already exist inside the territories. So what we do is connect people around the world with these initiatives. So we create a tourist experience with the favela, with these leaders. And one of the leaders that work with us work in special about environment. He's called Paulinho, and basically he takes a place. It's a really big point of trash. Vidigal is in a hill, and when you go down, we have the city, because we have in Rio de Janeiro favelas. Everything in Rio de Janeiro that's not a favela, we say pista. These other parts of Rio de Janeiro. Parts that we say institutional racism, no, ambiental racism for that, because the government don't care about what happens in favela, only what's happened in other parts of the city. So when you go out favela, just in front the sea, we have the ocean, this street, and a favela. All the trash of favela starts to go to these areas. So the government start to work to clean these areas. And this leader lives in Vidigal, and he works cleaning this trash. And he started to think, okay, this don't resolve the problem. So what I can do? So he had to clean this area, remove it around 20 tons of trash, and start to plant, make a community garden. And now this place is useful. It's really beautiful where people go enjoy. He produced more than 80 fruits, legumes, vegetables, medicinal herbs, and all that is for free for the community. So now propose to people like, okay, you come for trash to me, separate, and I'm gonna sell this trash to gain money to maintain this work, and I give to you everything we reduce. And he teach people how to make works of educational environment with the kids. And we, for example, with him, all the groups that we receive in Vidigal, we go to this place and he start to talk about his life, about the challenge of the territory, about his work. And we show the favela by the eyes of the people that make difference in this place. And at the same time, we are producing income to maintain this work and give visibility to him. We can create amazing things because for some connections that we can create, people comes here, visit, and want to donate, want to help, want to be volunteer.
Great, thank you for sharing, and also sharing how these initiatives can become sustainable for the long run, because that's what we really need. Coming back to you, Gopi, can you talk about maybe one solution? I know you already mentioned the mangrove forest and the climate resilient Pokali rice, but can you talk about maybe one more solution, whether large scale or small scale, and why do you think a solution like that has worked locally?
Rather than talking about one hyper-local level example, especially since Dylan was mentioning, about the macro level, we've been working on, initially we started conceptualizing an idea, looking at destinations, whether it's in Canada, US, or India, any place. In the future, there is no way that we can look at tourism the way we've been looking at it. Like we talk about climate justice in tourism, okay, I accept it, I agree it. But everything has to be looked from a destination perspective. And that destination is not a tourism destination, not only. it has people. So if you look at like last week, we had this unfortunate cyclone a couple of weeks ago in Jamaica. The total loss, according to the reports, like for them to recover, we are looking at $8 billion. With the frequency of the disasters that's going to hit us, already destinations are going through a fatigue. There is a clear destination fatigue when it comes to disasters. Like people are getting tired, governments are getting tired. And then if you look at the whole poly crisis that is happening around the world, humanitarian sector doesn't have enough money. They are just running with about $30 billion to address all the crises in the world. And now in this whole context, there is our tourism industry, which is sitting on a $9 trillion turnover. There's so much of magic we can do, but we are not even thinking about it. Now, the approach that we have taken is, if you look at a destination, any destination has to look at things from a climate change perspective, in the sense of a destination that is climate responsible, a destination that is equally climate resilient. So this is where a small city like Kochi, which I said in the booking.com said, top 10 places in the world to visit in 2026 is so interesting because we call it as a resilient Kochi initiative. The reason is, if you look at the government part, like we have the world's first 100% solar powered airport. And that airport has now become the second largest energy producer in the state. We've got Kochi rail network, which is already running on 65% on electricity, which is also renewable energy. And a water metro that's running on 100% electric boats. And the last mile connectivity, these are all done by electric tuk-tuks. So it's kind of a zero carbon system that is running from the government perspective. And then from the private sector initiatives, like even the airports are partially, it's kind of a quasi-government organization. So, 10,000 local shareholders invested in that airport. And on the private sector side, from a tour operator perspective, there are so many things that we can do in terms of building the resilience. Like, say, for example, think about a situation where in a place like Kochi or London or Nairobi, you name it, if the tour operators can put money and resources in training thousands of taxi drivers to be first responders, it is not rocket science. And the money that we are requesting the tour operators or the hospitality service providers in a destination, we are not asking them to do this investment in the community as a CSR. We are not asking them to do it as a philanthropy or like, that we made X million dollars of money. Now we need to, out of the guilt, I need to put together some 2% into the community. No, what I'm saying is in the future or even now, if you are not, or us as tour operators or people who work in the tourism, if we are not investing the money in building the capacity and resilience of the community, we are all going to be running out of business. Because if I'm a tour operator sitting in New York and I'm sending my travelers regularly to Sri Lanka, for example, but if I know that Sri Lanka is constantly affected by floods or cyclones or landslides, I'm going to think twice before sending my travelers there. But if I know that Sri Lanka is a place that is working with empathy and compassion and working with the local community and providing training so that they are becoming climate change adaptable, the game changes completely. So it's about ROI. So that is what it's been what we've been working, and this is what we are trying to convince. So right now we are actually building a platform to bring the humanitarian sector, development sector, and the tourism sector on a common platform. So that in the future, when a disaster happens, that we can activate the system. And it's working in different levels in different places, but I mean, we will soon be announcing the larger platform.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing just the huge potential that the tourism industry is sitting on right now. So I know we're almost at the end of this session. In the last 1 minute, just one line from each of you all. What is one shift in governance or mindset that you think can make tourism destinations more resilient to climate change? Dylan, we'll start with you, and then Joaquín and Gopi.
I had so much more to say. I think just shifting away from project-based thinking to more systems-based governance, where sort of tourism, climate adaptation, infrastructure, indigenous rights, community well-being are just thought of as together, not in silos. And we need to stop treating climate risk as like an interruption to tourism and treating it as a tourism strategy. And lastly, destinations that will thrive are the ones that embrace sort of cross-boundary collaboration. The climate doesn't respect jurisdictional lines, and neither should our planning. And just thanks for allowing me to be on this panel. It's great to hear from these gentlemen as well.
Thank you so much for being here. Joaquín?
So it's really hard to talk about that, because talk about mindset inside favelas is something a little crazy, because it's not just about mindset. People in general is surviving all the time, don't have resources for nothing. Much of them don't have capacitation, study. So the point is, we need more institutions, organizations like Favela Experience, like Favela Inc., a non-profit organization that work with us, that gives what these people need. Talent, we have creativity, but we need capacitation, we need real opportunities, we need to connect these people to the market. And with that, they can do the change. You know, they have this power. They just need this little help.
Perfect. Thank you. Gopi?
Well, there are 2 points that we've been obsessed with. One is about 2 weeks ago, we were co-organizing a climate finance conference in Kerala. And a lot of international consultants were there, and they were talking about the availability of $3 trillion available there for climate change related initiatives. Now, the experience is that this money, which is there in the global north, whenever, if at all, it comes to the so-called global south, it never really comes to destination level. It never really comes to the community level. That is the biggest challenge. Now, at the same time, okay, you can work hard, you can try to access that funds through whatever sources that is available. Primary thing that we need to do is to build in, especially since most of the affected communities are still, unfortunately, living in the global south, the knowledge and know-how that people have built over past, I would say, 2.5 decades, this needs to be shared. So somebody sitting in Jamaica, the way how they set up the early warning forecasting system should actually communicate to the people who are working on the cyclone forecasting system in Odisha. You know, 15 years ago, it was so normal in India to hear that during a climate change related disasters, 10,000 people died. Now in India, when a cyclone happens, last time, not even one person died. It shows the investment that has done in the space technology, in the early warning forecasting system. And then down back in Kerala, we have developed a system where it's a community-based early warning forecasting system, where people like you and I actually check, like that young boy in that video, where they document the rain gauges. Even that is providing information from bottom up. So these are not rocket sciences, simple stuff. The ISRO stuff might be rocket science, but the community-based early warning forecasting. So there's a lot of knowledge that is accumulated over decades. Now, South-South collaboration is what I believe is going to change the way we are looking at the building climate resilience.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Gopi. I think just a couple of quick takeaways. We need to really reframe this thinking around tourism, climate risk in tourism, and think of it as an opportunity. Look at how we can finance this through the $9 trillion budget that we're sitting in with tourism, and also build capacity within local communities to take the reins in their own hands. Thank you so much to all the panelists today, Dylan, Joaquín, and Gopi, for sharing your insights. And thank you, Ben, and the Travel Foundation, UN Tourism and Travelers, for this panel. Back to you, Ben.
So thank you, Shivya, and thank you, panelists. We're going to transition in a moment, hopefully, to live to Belém to hear from Virginia Fernandez-Trapa. She's trying to find a quiet place, apparently, at the moment to to join us. So we've got a few more minutes, so I'm just going to ask you a question, if that's okay. And it's to try and link really to the next session. And I'll leave it open to you guys who might respond. But if there was sort of one thing that you could hear from the COP delegation this year that you think would actually make a difference, based on the insights that you've been giving, I think I can kind of anticipate some of the answers here. But what would you like to hear? What would be the the thing that you think would really move the needle for you? And I'll leave it up to you to jump in.
Well, Ben, was this a question to the panelists or to the audience?
Oh, sorry. Yes, it was to you. Sorry, did not make that clear. Yes, to you. To anyone here, Shivya, you can answer too if you like. But anyone really, what do you think would be the thing that would really make a difference to get the news back from Belém? Gopi, did you want to?
I think what the panelists kind of mentioned in the previous answer around finances, around capacity building, I think like those are two real key priorities in destinations. And I think even if you look at today's session, like there's almost like a bit of disconnect between, the high level policy discussion and like ground realities. So I think we really need something to bridge that gap. And that is capacity building, that is finance.
Capacity building finance. Yeah, Gopi.
Yeah, Ben, see, I've been attending, like, including various other COP, like from Copenhagen. I've been attending different conferences. And I've been attending ITB Berlin, been on multiple panels in World Travel Market, all those places. But one reality, like, our Brazilian colleague, what I really liked about what he was saying is that you guys are talking about climate resilience, climate challenges, etc. But even before these words became really the kind of buzzwords, they've been going through this for a while. Like in that little video that I showed, seawater entered our villages in 2011. And it's never gone back. And people are living literally in the salt water. So instead of this, whenever we listen to the European North advisors, they are talking about building the resilience, etc. But we have crossed all those things to the extent that it's about how do we live with this? It's about climate change adaptability. It's not something like, okay, the fishing community, they are affected. Coastal lives is becoming very difficult to lead. We can't just shift these people to a mountain because their livelihood is there by the coast. So what do you do? So this is where climate change adaptability has to be the key focus. Like, because we are not talking about something we need to do tomorrow. It's about what we should have done yesterday. So it has to be definitely linked, as I was mentioning earlier, as well as Shivya repeated, climate financing. It has to go down to the community level. Community should not be looking at communities as like people who are victims or people who are the survivors, but they have to come on board as a decision makers. That is the only way. That is the only way. If the community is not there, there is no destination. And that reality has to come to our tourism industry.
Thanks, Gopi. And that's an interesting extra point, really, isn't it? And I think, the finance, the capacity building, and then the involvement and the engagement are all kind of needed. Thank you all. I think that Virginia is here now, so that's great. And so it just leads me to thank you all again for your really interesting perspectives, really different perspectives. And I think it has really brought at home what we're dealing with here and really what's at stake and why action is needed. So thank you very much. So now we're going to move on and attempt to connect live to Belém and to UN Tourism with Virginia Fernandez-Trapa. She will share the latest updates from COP30. You will know that the today and yesterday have been tourism-themed days. And so there's plenty to update us on, including outcomes from a high-level roundtable on advancing climate action in tourism. This session will provide first-hand insights into how governments are strengthening their institutional frameworks and national strategies, and how coordinated approaches to accelerated progress under the Glasgow Declaration. So with a bit of luck, we can get Virginia onto the platform. Hi, Virginia. Can you speak? Let's see if we can hear you.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're sideways. Can you
I'm
turn your-
sideways. Just
Yeah.
a second, Ben. You
Is
know,
that how
comms
it
is not
feels?
my thing, yeah? Just a second.
It's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us, and I'm sure you must be feeling.
I'm trying. I'm doing what I can. How about that? I don't know why
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sideways,
good.
Ben.
That's
It's
good.
good?
Yeah, yeah, it's good.
I
How
as-
are you? How are you first?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited to be trying this new live connection mechanism, to be honest. You know that communications is not exactly my thing. So yeah,
No,
it's
this is
like part
great.
of the adventure. I just wanted everybody to, you know, I don't know, get a glimpse of the vibe here, which is, as you see, very, very busy. There's people all over the place. And yeah, I mean, we have been having nice discussions. You wanted a recount basically about what we have been doing, right, Ben?
Yes, please. Yeah, I mean, just give us a flavor of what it's like there, how it compares to other COPs, and exactly what's actually been discussed at this COP during these tourism days.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, today is the second tourism day. We managed to get to the agenda this year, thanks to the support of the Ministry of Tourism of Brazil, and building on what we achieved on COP29. We started even one day before than yesterday with a brainstorming session together with stakeholders on how are we going to advance towards a global partnership for enhanced climate action in tourism. Actually, the climate champions, you know that the Paris Agreement is basically implemented by governments, so it's the parties that are advancing the process, but it's also supported by what they call non-party stakeholders, and that process of the non-party stakeholders is led by the climate champions. And I have the pleasure to inform everyone that we are now under that umbrella of the climate champions with our tourism prospects. And the prospects, as I said, are the Global Partnership for Enhanced Climate Action in Tourism, which obviously is, let's say, a mechanism that we're trying to build based on the seeds that were planted at COP29, and also to scale the good work that many of you are doing, including the Glasgow Declaration, obviously, that provides the implementation tool for all of that. So that was the start. We had a brainstorming session on how to plug into the process of the champions. Then yesterday on day one, we were discussing, I would say, mainly about mitigation in the morning. I mean, you're all aware, I'm sure that Susanne Eti this morning would have briefed you about the discussions here on phasing out fossil fuels. I mean, obviously, you know, aviation is not part of the process of Paris Agreement, so there's a little bit of a gap there. But we did have the possibility to engage with some aviation representatives in the morning of yesterday. There is now a discussion ongoing or about to finish on sustainable aviation fuels and tourism. So I think that somehow we have managed to strengthen or, you know, open some doors for all of us to start having aviation, you know, as part of the table when we discuss. I know, Ben, that also Trial Foundation has been discussing with aviation. So we need to regroup and think what should we, you know, be fostering in terms of synergies for sustainable aviation fuel and others. Then in the afternoon of yesterday, we shifted more into adaptation. One of the key elements under discussion here in Belém is the global goal on climate adaptation. As you can imagine, and as usual, it does not explicitly mention tourism. There's only one indicator in the indicators framework that speaks about ecotourism, but there is a lot of reference to the private sector in the indicators framework that is being proposed. And we once again feel, let's say, aligned with the overall process in the sense that we are uniquely positioned to bring our private sector on board and support the adaptation process by, for example, contributing to nature-based solutions, etc. All those aspects are covered in the adaptation indicators. Important piece of work was released together with Jeremy Smith, who's here with me, and other colleagues. We released a draft document on regenerative approaches for climate action in tourism. The logic was not so much to stay, let's say, obsessed, if you allow me, with defining regenerative tourism, but rather taking an approach that allows us to connect regenerative approaches with climate action. We think that regeneration has obviously a practical part, which is the one where we are contributing to regenerate ecosystems and supporting local communities, but it also has key elements connected to the change of mindset that we all need. And when those, let's say, are all wrapped together, can provide nice guidance for climate action to be more holistic. So we were, releasing that paper with the Ministry of Tourism of Brazil for a public consultation. Everyone is invited. I think Jeremy will be bringing more of this info later today. And I have no idea how am I doing on time-wise, Ben, or if you're getting
good.
dizzy with my
Don't
movement.
worry. No, this is okay. You got 5 more minutes.
Okay, great. For today, I mean, the main discussion, we were talking about the global partnership again. The main event under the action agenda, so under the Climate Champions, was taking place, we basically just finished a few minutes ago. We had representatives from Peru, we had representatives from Costa Rica, we had obviously Brazil, and EasyJet Holidays, and Iberostar Group was here as well. I mean, we are not many, but I would say we have a powerful crew on board here in person in Belém, and missing you all, obviously. So the discussion was just a more formal, let's say, version of the brainstorming that we had on the first day to really explore which are those solutions that businesses or destinations are putting in place that we really need to prioritize scaling. It went well. I mean, I know all these bits and pieces of processes are perhaps too bureaucratical for many, but they matter, and we are only able to be, making sense out of them because of the great work that you are all doing. There was an interesting development, Ben, that I also want to brief our audience about 2 weeks ago during the General Assembly of UN Tourism in Riyadh, where, I mean, it's something called Interinstitutional Working Group on Tourism and Climate Action. It's a working group established within the framework of our Executive Council, which is our main decision-making body. And that has already mobilized 29 countries under the presidency of the chairmanship, of Brazil, with the Maldives and Antigua and Barbuda as co-chairs. So I guess that the conclusion that I would want to highlight is that we really are little by little enhancing the governance, and that it's certainly unprecedented that climate action is in the agenda of UN Tourism Executive Council. And I really, I'm confident that that will help us all push forward precisely on adaptation, which I think is probably the area that we're all looking forward to accelerating more. I don't know if you have any questions, Ben?
I just wanted to emphasize really with you, I mean, the importance of these things like the global partnership and this working group. These are the sort of mechanisms that really make a difference within this sort of UN machine. That's true, isn't it? I think you sort of emphasized that to me before now, how important these things are. It's not just a group, it's, these things have institutional weight.
They do actually. So yeah, it's once again, just to reiterate that none of this would be possible without the work of our networks, everyone that is connected, the interest of all those that are chipping in to really advance climate action in tourism. So thank you, everybody.
And thanks, Virginia. Just one last question before we let you go. I mean, you sort of mentioned that sometimes tourism isn't explicitly mentioned in various circles and documents. How are you feeling, sort of based on COP this year? How well represented do you think tourism is in sort of the other circles, maybe outside of the tourism days?
Oh, certainly not sufficiently, Ben. I mean, what can I say? The action agenda this year doesn't mention tourism explicitly. You know, it has 6 strategic objectives, ranging from energy to stewardship of oceans and biodiversity, to, you know, social aspects, etc. It does not mention tourism explicitly, but it is through these what they call plans for accelerated solutions. So the sectoral solution that we have managed to integrate under the work of the global the high-level climate champions, that we are featured, let's say, in a cross-cutting manner, but most notably anchored under the axis of stewarding oceans and biodiversity. So really, well, I guess, you know, giving us a push for really advancing adaptation discussions, tools, and work in our sector.
Right. Well, thank you, Virginia, for taking the time and a little space out of your ridiculously busy day. It's amazing that we have tourism-themed days again this COP, and you know, that I think that does show that progress is being made, albeit maybe sort of slower than we would all like, but it's certainly we can see that there is momentum building. So we'll let you get back to it. Thank you very much for joining us, and looking forward to hearing how it all goes when you get back.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, I don't know if you can see it, but right behind me, I have the Turkey stand, so that we can all start planning forward for that. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Virginia.
Bye.
Okay, and bye. And that actually does help us to move to the next item on our agenda. So let me share screen again, and we'll get going. So Virginia talked a lot there about adaptation, and this is where we're kind of moving into for the next session that we have here. So I'd like to invite Jeremy Sampson, the CEO of the Travel Foundation, to join us on the platform. So Jeremy's going to talk about Where Next, which is a campaign that introduces 4 big ideas to support a just transition for tourism destinations. Jeremy, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hi, Jeremy. Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay.
I'm going to say over to you, and please tell us more about what these 4 ideas are, and yeah, why they should be of interest to people here.
Sure. Hello, everyone, and just apologies in advance. I have a bit of a cold, so my voice is a bit scratchy, but hopefully you can hear me and understand me well. It's such a pleasure to be here celebrating COP30, and it was so nice to hear Virginia, you know, sort of live from Brazil, sharing with us all the progress. It does feel like these conversations have evolved and matured in so many ways since the last even since last year, but certainly since the beginning of the decade, when the climate action work it really accelerated across our sector. So just nice to have these milestone moments once a year to reflect on how far we have come and how much there is to do yet. So I have about 15 minutes to share with you some perspective on our Where Next campaign and at the Travel Foundation, and you know, what we have accomplished so far with this campaign, the context and the why, and where we go from here. But I just want to start with a little bit of perspective of my own. So tourism is facing what I would call climate reality now. It's no longer about choosing between decarbonization or adaptation or understanding. It's about understanding what's already happening to destinations and responding with honesty and with courage. For years, our sector has poured energy into actions, often symbolic, But destinations are living the consequences right now. Heat, water scarcity, migration pressures, infrastructure strain, collapsing insurance markets, workforce volatility. We can't afford passive ambition any longer, and we need active adaptation at the proper scale and at the proper speed. My job, and I think the Travel Foundation's job and many of our partners, is to make climate literacy real, to support destinations that are already on the front lines, businesses the same, and to help the industry move from rhetoric to systems change. This is a justice issue, not a branding exercise. And if we can embrace climate reality, climate realism with fairness and courage, I believe that tourism can still be a force for good, but only if we start acting like it. If you can move to the next slide, please. And one more, actually. Thanks. So tourism isn't just facing climate risk, it is being reshaped by it. Communities around the world are already being reshaped by the impacts of climate change. The risk analysis work that we've been doing through our RiskScan project with partners over the last year and a half shows that accelerating impacts across every region of the world. Rising temperatures, again, water stress, insurance withdrawal, disrupted labor markets, ecosystem degradation, and strain on infrastructure. The truth is that climate impacts are moving faster than our governance systems, than our financing models, and our planning cycles. And the gap between what the sector needs and what the sector can currently deliver is widening. While there is excellent work happening, I really want to emphasize we have made lots of progress, but small isolated projects cannot meet a structural challenge. We need mechanisms that shift how decisions are made, how money flows, and who is protected so that destinations can adapt at the speed that's required. And right now, it's very difficult to do so within the current system, but we believe that that system is malleable enough and that there are levers of change. And that's the backdrop for the work that we're doing now and through this campaign. Next slide, please. So to understand how the sector is responding already and wants to respond, and how the systems change narrative can come to life and become reality, we ran a global consultation over the last 6 months or so, starting at London Climate Action Week and leading up to now when we're closing this first phase of that consultation. We had many stakeholder voices contributing. Destinations, businesses, civil society, academia, people from frontline communities. We used a global survey, we had webinars, we had regional roundtables, we had events at New York and London Climate Week, and a working group in Latin America and the Caribbean as the host region of COP this year. And what emerged was a collective blueprint for systems change, not a wish list, but a grounded set of priorities that reflect both the urgency of climate impacts and the systemic barriers to action. And we started asking these questions: are we able to affect that change across the system, and how can we do that feasibly? So while this consultation phase is formally closing so that we can move into action, I want to emphasize that we haven't done enough listening. There's never enough listening, and this will remain a living process, and we'll keep evolving the ideas as the world and the risks and the realities evolve, on the ground in our sector, and as stakeholders, begin to act and evolve their own realities as well. On the next slide, please. So we introduced in this consultation a big ideas framework. We called it 4 big ideas for unlocking systems change across travel and tourism, and particularly focusing on ways that we can influence and impact governance and resourcing. 4 big ideas rose consistently to the top, and while they've evolved since the initial part of this consultation, the core of them has remained fairly similar. And a lot of the feedback that we got was around framing. How do we frame these issues so that they are taken up by different stakeholders? How do we connect these big ideas so that we demonstrate that they're not just standalone projects or fragments of a system, but they are interdependent levers that can help to shift how tourism works. And I believe that these ideas are ambitious, but also reality based. That they are ideas that are possible if we find if we determine the best ways to collaborate and align around them. It's not about one organization implementing this. Rather, many are coming together to help move the system forward. So the 4 ideas, like I said, we really see them increasingly as interdependent. The first one is around understanding the risks. And here we're calling for a global open source climate risk register for destinations that will help to stakeholders to make better decisions, have better information, and to have alignment with destinations around where tourism is most vulnerable and what needs to happen, and where investment must flow first, and how we can also avoid cannibalizing or contributing, exacerbating, whether intentionally or otherwise, to that risk. So this could be for investors, for public-private partnerships, even for travelers to have that information about where destinations will need help, because the impact of climate change is changing their realities. 2, mobilizing the money. We believe that there must be a dedicated finance mechanism. Finance is coming up again and again, but that mechanism must channel funds directly into destination level resilience and community adaptation. There must be a lens of equity and climate justice built into such finance mechanisms. But at the end of the day, the important thing is that it can be very difficult for communities in the tourism sector at large to access the kind of capital that's really required to make sort of wholesale adaptation and resilience come to life. And we need to close that gap by creating not accepting that, but creating better pathways for those mechanisms to be to bring the right level of capital into places so that there can be meaningful change, and not plans that are based on having a limited funding reality. Idea number 3 is around building capacity. We're specifically calling here for a tourism transition facility. Many sectors, many regions have put together plans for a just transition, and this is tourism's. This is our attempt to sort of frame what a just transition would look like in the tourism sector, particularly focused on workforce, small and medium-sized businesses, and destination management organizations, making sure that they are equipped with the tools and the skills to transition the tourism model away from an extractive model towards increasingly resilient, fair, and low carbon models of travel and tourism that can be a net positive for places in the long run. And 4th, requiring an equity mandate or a fair deal for communities. We believe it's equity and climate are fully integrated ideas, and that an equity index for tourism that would help tourism development, management, marketing, and ultimately reporting to create accountability around community benefit, more equal spread of benefit from tourism, and ensure that tourism operates with a clear social license to operate would be a dramatically positive step in the right direction for how we think about the economics of tourism and how that interfaces with climate. Together, these big ideas create an architecture for the future of our sector, and a way to shift the system towards fairness and towards climate solutions that can deliver real change. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to talk for too long about where we go from here, because I think the most important thing is for everyone to have these ideas and understand them, and begin to think about where there might be alignment or opportunities to collaborate. And that's where we're going now. So as I said, we've sort of closed the initial formal consultation, and we're moving into action mode because we don't have time to lose, really. And to turn these ideas into action, the Where Next campaign now is going to evolve into basically a two-part delivery mechanism. One will be the campaign that will continue. So the structure for the campaign will provide opportunities to convene, to communicate, to tell stories, to build alignment among as many stakeholders as possible, to integrate with the great work happening in other organizations like UN Tourism, like our partners here at Travelist, and others that are also working here at the global stage towards common objectives. But the idea is to have a shared narrative and momentum for the sector, and for that there needs to be we believe, a backbone for this campaign and a narrative that helps us to do that outreach that is still missing as we align with other sectors and other funding and resource mechanisms that will help to see tourism as part of the solution. And then the solution portfolio itself. This is the layer of action that will highlight a set of projects, partnerships, pilot initiatives, signature solutions that show how the big ideas will come to life on the ground. This is a pipeline really for resourcing, and again, not just about one organization, but about how we can come together to help deliver on this vision. And this follows what we call at the Travel Foundation, the stakeholder journey, from research and advocacy to help win hearts and minds in the sector, to building of capacity to build skills and knowledge and know-how on the ground in places, to pilot programs that can be scaled, to advocating for and seeing the implementation of effective policy and investment and scale resources at the scale that's required for these ideas to become the norm, and to drive further change in the sector. So on the next slide, I'm just going to start share the next steps here. So we're in the sort of next sprint is from here to ITB really in March, where we are beginning to turn this consultation into a giant collaboration. We've already recruited and will launch now a global advisory group that will help to guide strategy and accountability and do help with reality checks on these ideas so that we can ensure that they're feasible and not just talk shops. This advisory group will be a time-bound, a short stint between now and April, and then we will consider together how to evolve and make sure that there's inclusive perspectives as possible, and lots of great representation for perhaps a more formal governance around this. So this advisory group that we've started with, we are really happy to have some great people at the table advising, and it's really to see through this next phase, which will result in the first publication of an action agenda related to these ideas. So we'll be hosting working sessions for any stakeholders to join around the big ideas and how we can bring them to life. We have several sectoral engagements with the accommodation sector, the tour operator sector, with destinations, to look at the sectoral perspective and experience with these ideas, and to co-design new pilots and new projects and new partnerships. And most importantly, the goal is to secure commitments and resources to begin activating this work, and that's where alignment will start to move into implementation. On the next slide, I'm just mentioning here that obviously movements like this, campaigns like this, do need resources, and this is more of a call to action for us to align again as much as possible. Not a single organization initiative, rather a collective platform will have the best chance of mobilizing resources if we can think together about how to align and make that possible. So it's designed to elevate and connect the work that's already happening and create a place for new ideas. But that's there are sort of two layers of that. The backbone funding will support coordination and convening and communications around the campaign. We need to we need to tell great stories, both on the sort of technical side of what's happening and on the personal side, because there are amazing stories all over the world of resilience and adaptation, and these are inspirational, and we want to make sure that those ideas are elevated. That is the glue that holds all this movement together. And then implementation funding, obviously, for those who have are interested in being a part of putting these ideas to from paper to ground. We are hopeful that there will be lots of interest in aligning on designing partnerships and creating the mechanism of engagement that will demonstrate to funders, to donor agencies, to companies, to policymakers that there is a serious an interested group of collective actors that are excited about these ideas and want to see them come to life. So the more we can bring that together, the better opportunity we'll have to build momentum together on the resourcing, addressing the resourcing issue. On the next slide, please. I just want to mention that everything we've achieved so far as the Travel Foundation, and through this campaign has been because of collaboration. There's very little that we can do on our own. So this initiative, again, exists to catalyze collective action, not to promote any one organization. And our partners, many of whom are represented here today, we're going to hear from on our panel, really show us what's possible when we share data, when we align incentives, when we work together and have the proper dialogue that leads to action. But no one can transform tourism alone, but together I believe that we can reshape the future of the sector. Next slide, please. So if we stay aligned and we keep the momentum going, we'll be here a year from now at COP31, which will be in Turkey. Here's what success perhaps will look like. A sector that continues to unite around a shared action agenda, again, aligned with other great work that's happening, the Glasgow Declaration, other mechanisms, particularly through our partners at UN Tourism, who are moving things on the ground, on the political side and with member states. So we're trying to stay in sync on those things as much as possible. But here's an action agenda for organizations and businesses and destinations who are implementing on the ground on a day-to-day basis. Climate action blueprint, again, to align with that other work that showcases this good work that's happening on the ground and how we take it forward. Co-funded pilots or new projects and initiatives that are underway in multiple regions of the world. An annual session just like this one that can allow us to provide transparency and accountability and updating on the momentum so that we can reflect and keep going. I think the other piece of success that we'd really like to see and really advocate for is even more leadership, ownership, visibility from our friends in the Global South. This would show a sector that's not just actively acknowledging risk, but beginning to respond to it in a proper and effective way. So on the last slide, I just want to close by saying we talk a lot about uncertainty, especially living day to day in the nonprofit sector in a challenging political environment and economic environment. But the defining reality to me of this moment is not just collaboration, but interdependence. We have interdependence, I believe, as an ecosystem of actors, and meaningful cooperation is our most powerful tool. So if we face climate reality, which is how I started this talk, if we face climate reality with honesty, with fairness, and with courage, tourism can become a force for resilience, justice, and shared prosperity, but only if we start acting like it. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share those reflections, and look forward to further discussion from our panel coming up.
Thank you, Jeremy. And that's a nice positive end there. If you don't mind hanging around, because as you've already introduced this panel pretty much through your presentation, and it'd be great to sort of have you around for that too. So I'd like to bring Terry Brown onto the platform, please. Terry also works at the Travel Foundation. He's our lead for Latin America and the Caribbean. And he's going to be moderating this session. Hello, Terry, are you there? Hi, Terry. Do you want to talk?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you well.
Great.
Thanks for kicking us off for the panel discussion. I'll let you go on from here.
Thank you. Do we have panelists too? I can't see anyone except you.
Yeah, they're all here.
Great. I'll change my view. There you are. Great. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you, Ben, and to Jeremy for that excellent overview of the Travel Foundation's Global Action Agenda for Tourism's Climate Transition. We're next, and obviously with our partners too. And it's great that you're staying here, Jeremy. So you know, we'll get to hear your reflections perhaps at the end on this discussion we're about to have. And welcome to everyone else to this session, where we're going to be discussing sector perspectives on these big ideas that have just been presented. You've just heard a clear call to action from Jeremy. So what we're going to do now is discuss that, how it might be applied in practice, and go through some examples from our excellent panel, which we have here. Nina, Jose Juan, can't see Jose Juan yet. Hopefully he is here or coming. Aditi and Nicole. Great, there's Aditi. So I'll ask you to introduce yourselves shortly, and I'll just introduce whilst we wait as well. Here's Jose Juan. Great, so we have our full panel. Welcome. Each of them brings a different perspective, which is obviously the title of this session, and that matters because the challenges we're dealing with affect the whole tourism system. Climate risk is accelerating, investment is patchy, trust between communities and tourism is under strain. So this panel is about grounding these big ideas into practical experiences and examples, which we hope we can learn from, potentially examples that could be scaled up. So during this session, we'll be exploring smarter, fairer investment for adaptation and resilience. We'll be exploring governance and accountability, and also what businesses and destinations need from others, and what they can bring to the table to move faster. So talking of moving faster, let's get started. So I'd like to start by asking each of the panelists to briefly introduce yourselves and also tell us which of the four big ideas feels most urgent to you right now and why. And I'm going to start in alphabetical order. So starting with you, Aditi, please.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Aditi Mohapatra here. I'm the Vice President for Global Social Impact and Sustainability at Expedia Group. And yeah, so I think, from our perspective, thank you so much, Jeremy, for that overview. It's been great to be able to follow along with the work that the Travel Foundation is doing in this space, and obviously a really important effort overall to point in the direction of, what are the major changes that we need to see across the travel and tourism industry. The issues tied to destination stewardship and the health and resilience of destinations are critical to the future of the travel industry, to the future of our business, and we're thinking about that regularly. So this is an effort overall that feels very connected to the areas that we see as needing to have a focus on over the next several years. So overall, all of them are very important issues, but I guess if we have to pick for now, I would say really tied to the risk register. I think that's really where we would love to see more intention and effort. I think as a company that has connections to destinations all over the world and sending travelers to destinations all over the world and have partners all over the world, really having alignment around what some of those priority areas and regions might be from the communities themselves, from the destinations, and from stakeholders across the industry helps us to align around the issues that are most important to our travelers and to our partners. Really, it's consistency and trust, and maintaining those through kind of a rigorous process, and being able to show to our travelers what we're seeing from these efforts is obviously very important. So I think that's the area that we would prioritize.
Thank you, DT. And over to Jose Juan, and then Nicole, and then Nina.
Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. I am Jose Juan Lorenzo, Managing Director of Tourism of the Canary Islands. For me, the most urgent of the four big idea is mobilizing money. If tourism is serious about becoming positive impact industry, and it must, then we need mechanisms that channel real resources into the regeneration and the natural ecosystem and the cultural access on which destination depend. Sorry. Without practicable structured investment in resilience, everything else remains aspirational. This is why we are working toward the creation of the Tourist Resilience Fund, a practical tool to ensure that tourists contribute systematically to restoring nature, strengthening communities, and protecting the very foundation of our communities.
Thank you,
Thank
Jose.
you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole Asher Solano, and I'm the CEO in the Ministry of Tourism for Belize. It's really good to be on the panel. Thanks, and I really appreciate the big four that you mentioned, Jeremy, and as Aditi mentioned, and also Jose, all four are very important. I think I will go with Jose's perspective on the mobilization of resources for us and I think many of the smaller island states in the Caribbean especially, adaptation is key. So in order to do that and in order to be able to be resilient in the face of all of the changes in climate, you know that Jamaica just faced a major hurricane, as we've been talking about in many of these forums. We need to be able to mobilize the resources in order to implement adaptation. I also, I mean, at the risk of going to a number two, I do see that your mention of a fair deal for the communities, especially for the smaller destinations like Belize and many of our smaller countries. Sustainable tourism is based very, very much on community development and being able to build capacity and being able to ensure that the people in our communities are understanding the level of communication that we're having at all levels and can implement on the ground is key. So I have a key interest in seeing that implementation at the community level. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Nicole. Over to you, Nina.
Thank you so much. So first of all, so lovely to be on this panel and just really lovely to be here with all of you. So thank you so much for the invitation. I will first of all echo what everybody else has mentioned. As we know, all four big ideas need to move forward together. And I love that Jeremy just used the word interdependence because really all four of these ideas are interdependent pieces of the same puzzle. So while it's important to focus on each of them individually and make sure they get the attention they need, we of course can't build resilience or move the needle within destinations or within our sector at large unless each of the pieces is activated and coordinated together. And also just to introduce myself briefly, I am Nina Boys. I'm the Vice President of Sustainability and Beyond Green. So we represent over 70 leaders in the accommodation space all around the world that are really demonstrating what meaningful hospitality looks like in action and how accommodation and intentional hospitality can drive meaningful change at the local level across nature, culture, and community. So for that reason, while I can't choose one favorite big idea, I think I would say the one that most excites me is building capacity, because to me, that's how we take data, funding, and equity metrics, and we really channel it into change on the ground. Because without actually empowering communities to take these ideas and have the skills to really implement them, I think that we are going to fall short of the goals. So this is also an opportunity to really localize knowledge and skills to adapt to environmental, social, and cultural contexts, which was another big piece of feedback that came back from the global consultation. It's also a really exciting idea to me because it's really an area where the accommodation sector can lead by example. So accommodation accommodation, hotels, resorts, lodges, and beyond, are real anchors and destinations. So they provide livelihoods to local communities. They're deeply embedded in local supply chains. They're shaping visitor experiences, which is, of course, what the tourism industry is all about. So I think it's really a way that accommodation can take big ideas and really catalyze change at the local level and make it meaningful, make it tangible, and make it beneficial.
Great. Well, thank you, all of you. Obviously, we think all of these ideas are important, and as Nina said, they're all interconnected. But I think we had a range of all of the big ideas reflected in your answers there. So that's great. So two of you said money. So we'll start there. We were going to start there anyway, so that was lucky. I'd like to start with you, Jose Juan. You did mention the Resilience Fund already, so maybe you could just tell us a bit more about how the Canary Islands is approaching adaptation finance and the RegNext offer model.
Thank you, Terry. Financing adaptation is one of the biggest barriers we all face. In our case, we are reframing the role of tourism in the Canary Islands. Our vision is simple. Tourism should not only be compatible with nature and culture, it should be beneficial to both. This is the proposal behind RegNext, our new destination-wide program that brings regeneration into the core tourism development. It creates a collaborative framework rooted in the destination stewardship that involve all actors, public institutions, tourism companies, visitors, and local communities. RegNext will allow businesses travel to voluntarily contribute to concrete restoration projects, reforestation, coastal protection, biodiversity recovery. It is not a traditional sustainability project. It is a shared strategy to restore the assets that sustain the destination, increase climate resilience, and strengthen our local identity. This model supports smarter and fairer investment flow because it links contribution directly to measurable impact on the ground. And it engages those who benefit from tourism in the responsibility of protecting it.
Thank you, Jose Juan. You're really showing regional leadership there and showing how these clear structures can steer investment in the right direction. I'd like to broaden this question now to Aditi. With your experience at Expedia, potentially Travelist too, I don't know if you want to mention that. How can major travel platforms support smarter and fairer investment flows for adaptation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think going back to some of the conversation that we were having early on, just around connecting to better data and insights and ensuring that really we have that ability to be able to look across to, one, understand where our impact is going to be felt the most. I think, having that kind of sense across our industry, but of course, across many of our peers, our partners within the Travelist Coalition, where we're working with many other online marketplace companies to have a more consistent view on where effort would go the furthest, I think would be really helpful. I think as well as, a better understanding of what's working. So, it's great to see some examples, but I think, having a better data and insights around, again, what's most effective and where collaboration both within the travel industry and beyond the travel industry. I think that the kinds of issues that we're talking about are ones that extend across many different sectors. I think there's many other industries that are also interested in the well-being of these destinations, and how we can think a little bit more deliberately about looking up and looking out to support with peers across a variety of different sectors, I think would also be potentially transformative. I mean, the kinds of resources that we need to be able to drive to address these issues, is a meaningful contribution. And, I think really also going back to something Nina mentioned just around capacity building, it's an area that we've also been focused on to ensure that the destinations themselves are understanding and ready to, request the kind of support and assistance that they may need. So we've designed a program in partnership with the Travel Foundation to support capacity building of destination management organizations around climate risk and resilience. It's called the Destination Climate Champions Program. We've supported close to 100 different DMOs to participate in that program to build their capacity and understanding of the impacts of climate change to their communities and their destinations, which is just a precursor. I think it's, starting to get that capacity built, but then obviously then transforming that into the kinds of investment requests and mobilization that we need to be able to actually support destinations in this transition as well.
Thank you, Nita. You made a clear case there, linking with data and smart investment, but also then went on to the capacity building. So you covered two big ideas there as well. I'd like to go back to something that Nicole, you were talking about, the community side, the governance and accountability. So to move on to that section of the big ideas now. So from Belize's perspective, what governance and accountability changes are the most important, do you think, to ensure that tourism delivers a fair deal for communities?
Well, let me start by saying that in the case of Belize, we're already, we're such a small destination, and our entire tourism industry is focused on community-based tourism, or a lot of it. So we already have just, I think, naturally and organically that interaction between public-private sector to ensure that the policies that we put in place do translate on the ground. There's always room for improvement for that. And I don't want to suggest that it's a perfect situation, because it isn't. I talked earlier about adaptation and capacity building as well, to ensure that the communities are at the center of the decisions. When it comes to financing, we also need to make sure that the available finances that come into the country actually make its way on the ground into the communities, and it's being felt in the everyday lives of the people in the communities, who are the people who are delivering on the tourism experience. The market is coming in, they want to interact. The type of tourism we're offering is really the type of tourism that the market demands now more and more. But we need to prepare our communities, and we need to make sure that the finances that we're accessing are actually come in and can, do youth training, education, healthcare, all of the things that are important for a community for them to be able to develop and give that service and welcome the guests. There also needs to be, I think, more transparent frameworks to understand the carbon footprints of the traveler, and how we can improve water and energy use, waste management, and the extended social impact for the communities. These are things that we can't get away from. The carrying capacity of sensitive sites, all of these things are topics that the communities have to engage in. So I would say really just making sure that they're a part of the planning, that we have that extensive, not just say collaboration, but actually effect it, through community groups, community engagement, and consistent community engagement to ensure that it's translating.
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, you've emphasized the importance of public sector, private sector collaboration, transparency, understanding that carrying capacity, putting communities at the heart of decision making. Many things which are not limited to climate action; they're actually destination stewardship principles as well. I wanted to move on to Nina now to ask for maybe if you can give us a practical example of this, of putting communities at the heart of decision making, which Nicole mentioned, with your experience at Beyond Green and with co-management of the co-management models. Can you give us an example of what fair governance looks like in practice?
Absolutely. And I just want to underscore, first of all, that I think the Where Next report really makes clear that tourism is often more extractive of destinations, and it takes more than it gives. Decision-making power rarely lies with local communities that are most affected, not only by tourism, but also by a changing climate. So, I think within that context, obviously, we need to see a large swing of the pendulum, not just an incremental change, but in large systemic shifts, which is what this is all about. And I also wanted to quickly add, I was just at a community meeting 2 weeks ago for a destination project we're leading in upstate New York. And we were having a community gathering, inviting different people to join and share their perspectives. And one local resident got up with a microphone, a script she had written on a piece of paper, and a shaking hand. And she very vulnerably and clearly said, "I'm anti-tourism. I don't want tourism here. I see the negative impacts, but I also love to travel." So I can see the contradiction there. But when it's my home, I want to protect it. And yet I don't actually feel like I have a voice in shaping the future of what travel and tourism looks like here. And I thought that was such an insightful comment, because it is exactly what happens when we don't center communities and give real power to residents to really have a meaningful voice in shaping what travel looks like for them. So coming back to your question, Terry, of a real life case study example, one of the reasons that Beyond Green became the lead accommodation partner on the Where Next initiative was really to show what leadership examples can look like. And while there are so many to highlight, one that I think really summarizes what we're talking about clearly is one that's also featured in the report, and that is from And Beyond Mnemba Island, so one of our member hotels in Tanzania. And it's an example that really shows how tourism built on multi-stakeholder partnerships can help nature recover while also sustaining and growing livelihoods, showing that resilience can help grow and make sure that everyone has a seat at the table. So in this particular example, Mnemba Atoll in Tanzania faces many of the same pressures as other coastal ecosystems around the world. So they're experiencing overfishing, coral bleaching, overdevelopment, and of course, rising tourism pressure. So to confront some of these risks, the communities, government, and tourism operators all came together to protect the fragile ecosystem. And they did that by creating a partnership with Zanzibar's Ministry of Blue Economy and Fisheries, the Mnemba Island Marine Conservation Area, 11 of the surrounding village councils, the company And Beyond, and their community partner Wild Impact. And all together, they collaboratively came together and they established the Mnemba Island Marine Special Area. So this is a co-managed zone that limits access, funds conservation, and supports local livelihoods. And within the zone, community and conservation rangers are monitoring reefs, they are enforcing sustainable fishing, and they're helping to restore and regenerate coral reef. So on Zanzibar's main island, on land, they are also driving programs that are providing youth education, enterprise training, and work placement. So really working not only to protect nature, but to also educate and empower the younger generation to become custodians and stewards of their marine resources. And what I also love about this example is that they have real tangible and measurable impact. So in the case of this project, conservation income has grown 500%, and the funds have been reinvested transparently into community and environmental priorities. They've been able to provide community ranger roles that provide stable livelihoods to community members, and reef pressure has actually decreased by 60% as boat traffic is reduced. At the same time, this has allowed coral restoration and regeneration within the ecosystem. So just a really great example of where communities can share authority, and when they benefit from the impacts of this and the role that tourism plays, this is a way that tourism can really strengthen local well-being and ecosystem resilience rather than just extracting from it.
Thank you, Nina. And if we had more time, as we were talking about, the community reaction there, your first response, I would have brought in Jose Juan. I was really tempted to, but we're short on time, so I won't, because I know it would have been another good example. I will move on now because I wanted to broaden this out to talk about the roles, and I think we just had a question come in or a comment come in about this. So the roles that different actors can play, and I wanted to go to you because we have representation from different perspectives here, as the title suggests, and ask, what are the roles that your organization or organizations like yours can play, and what support do you need from others? Because we're talking about a connected system here. So maybe we'll start the other way around this time and start from a global perspective with Aditi. So from the platform perspective, what can Expedia contribute to this transition, and what alignment do you need from destinations, from suppliers, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a global marketplace, we are connecting obviously millions of travelers on a daily basis with travel decisions. And so the more that we have consistent information and trusted information that we can provide to our travelers, that's really what we need to give them the right kinds of signals around what responsible travel options look like. So that's across hotels and destinations and airlines. And obviously that's the focus of our partnership within the Travelist Coalition, but consistency on what kind of information we can provide to travelers that is obviously trusted and has met a rigorous standard is very important to us. So what we can do is provide information to travelers, give them signals, give them options as to what more responsible travel choices look like, and then really support on the other side of our marketplace, our partners throughout the travel ecosystem in this transition and in this work. And so that includes the work that we're doing with destinations, but across hotels and airline and other parts of the travel industry, we have the ability to convene the full sector and really bring together a lot of these issues and our partners together to address the kinds of things that we're talking about today. So I think we can bring scale and information and trusted information to the industry.
Thank you, Aditi. And moving to a regional destination perspective, Jose Juan, what can the Canaries bring to this transition? Obviously, a lot. Tell us about it, and what do you need from the industry and investors?
As a destination, our big strength and also our biggest challenge is complexity. What we can offer is to figure out the big complexity that a destination have. No? So we think that we need a single shared climate action plan. We are already moving in that direction from year 2022. Our climate action master plan and our work under the Glasgow Declaration give us a structured pathway. But for this transformation to scale, we need deeper collaboration from tourist industry operating in our islands. Airline, tour operator, hotel group, experience provider. We need them to join the this shared climate action plan and co-invest in resilience exactly as where next global action agenda, as Jeremy said before, proposed us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose Juan. So now going to the national level, Nicole, from Belize's position, what can your ministry lead on, and what support and partnerships do you need from businesses and partners?
Thank you. Well, I think that we have, as I mentioned before, our entire industry was, founded on these practices just organically. So I think we have a lot of experience. Belize has about 40% of its entire territory, and that's terrestrial and marine, already under some form of conservation. So I think that we do have a lot to contribute regionally, globally, in terms of how we have grown our tourism. We have a National Tourism Sustainable Master Plan, so all of our growth and development is based on that foundation. I would say that also the experience with the Blue Bond Initiative, those are some of the things. Now, in terms of what we need and collaboration, we are involved a lot with the Caribbean, with Central America. We talk a lot about regional integration and about bringing the countries together in order to have greater impact and access finances together. I think there has to be more of that. The discussion I had earlier about the collaboration with communities also needs to happen at the national, regional level, where we can really talk about our needs and come together and ensure that we have what we need together as a region to be able to access that adaptation finance, to be able to ensure that the coastal protection is a priority, you know, to make sure that our reefs are continue to be protected. We have a big issue regionally right now with sargassum, which is impacting our tourism industry. So even to be able to collaborate and work together to find solutions, I think this is all a part of the progress, how we tackle and how we adapt. So you know, that I would leave it as that, to be able to work together.
Thank you, Nicole. And yeah, it reminds me that Belize is very much part of Central America and part of the Caribbean. So that integration is important on both sides there. Finally to Nina then, from the hospitality group offer maybe, what do you need from policymakers and platforms to help scale the sorts of regenerative models you've been working on?
Yeah, so as we've talked about, and I'm very inspired by the other examples provided in this panel, you know, accommodation and hotels really sit at the intersection of so many different groups of people. So visitors, local government, they're protecting ecosystems, or they're at least reliant on ecosystems if they're not yet protecting it. They're providing local livelihoods, but there's always opportunities, of course, to find ways to leverage this to actually scale climate impact. And I think importantly, for accommodation, you know, not only are they able to really engage local community in a really collaborative and kind of interactive way, you know, as hubs, they can also pilot programs. They can demonstrate what real action looks like and what impact can mean for local communities. So in that sense, I think they can kind of be like an interesting hub to try new things out. They're also, you know, really able to contribute to local stewardship, I think in a pretty unique way. And, you know, our Beyond Green members are really showing how hospitality can help to fuel initiatives to protect nature, celebrate and protect cultural heritage, and also really empower communities. So, you know, from that sense, you know, the connectivity that accommodation brings throughout this conversation is absolutely key. And one thing I don't want us to lose in this discussion is there's a huge amount of opportunity to integrate all of this through the visitor experience. So, you know, so much of activating meaningful change on the ground in destinations, at hotels, within communities will come from more aware, educated, incentivized, and empowered visitors. So if you're actively bringing them into these solutions, you're showing them how making better choices can actually enhance their experience. I think that's where we're going to be able to unlock a lot of the barriers we run into. So not seeing climate action as an obligation, but really an opportunity, and not making sustainability feel like a sacrifice, but actually a value add. So in this way, I think that, you know, that's a really important avenue that we can use to unlock all of the big ideas. And in terms of what we need from others, so we actually asked our Beyond Green members this through the Where Next survey. And some of the things we heard back was accessibility and usability of climate data and tools. So actually being able to use real-time data in practical ways that work for a hotel operation and that they can collaborate at the local level. And using community-centered decision-making to also guide strategic communication, both of this campaign, but also of climate action more largely. It came back very clearly that depending on where you're operating in the world, you're going to have very different views politically and socially of the conversation around climate. So depoliticizing that to the best of our ability and having a unified way that we're communicating these priorities and ensuring that everybody understands that it's not just an obligation, but really there's an opportunity where we can all benefit here together. And then governance and accountability. So making sure that anything we do at the local level and at the industry level is clear, compliant, and transparent is another really key part of this.
Great, thank you, Nina. Yeah, you've made some really important points there, and especially reminding us that this is an industry with, you know, focuses on visitors, and there's always an opportunity to this. You know, there's always two sides to the same coin when you're making a business case. So very much echo that. I've been keeping an eye on my chat here because we are running over time, but I've heard that we do have a little bit more because they're still tracking down Jeremy Smith at at COP. So I think he may or may not be coming. So Ben, we're okay? Are we to carry on chatting here?
Yeah, we are. I'll explain more in a minute, but we've got a bit more time yet.
Great. Okay. That's brilliant. Because I wanted to ask, Jose Juan, did you want to come in?
No, yeah, please.
Okay. I wanted to ask a forward-looking question to sort of close off our session. And I wanted to ask each of you actually, if there's one big challenge that would give you confidence that the tourism is genuinely preparing for a warming world. So, so from your perspective, and maybe this time around we can start with Nina and then work from that scale. So Nina, Nicole, Jose Juan, and then Aditi.
Sure, thank you so much. So for me, I think I will be confident that tourism is genuinely preparing for a warming world when we are actually able to say, you know what, we've broken down silos of the sector. We have finally moved from talk to coordinated action. And again, when we see climate action, biodiversity conservation, and community empowerment, not as an obligation, but really as an opportunity to strengthen the resilience of our planet, people, and economies. And Terry, you just mentioned the business case here. I think, we've, in all of our conversations, we've recognized that, climate action and all of our efforts to make the world a better place and to build a more equitable and resilient future cannot be dependent on philanthropy or on the goodwill of individuals. It has to make business sense. So the more that we're able to really embrace that, I think that when we see that coordination happening and we see talk moving to action and we see light bulbs going off with the people that actually hold funds to say, I understand the ROI of this and I'm investing in this, not just because it's the right thing to do, because it also makes a lot of sense. And so I'll pause there, but that's what would give me confidence at this stage.
Thank you. Over to Nicole.
So I really do think it is twofold. So it's with the stakeholders and the industry and also with the visitors. We need to adapt. We need to make sure that we are putting in place what we need to do to manage the situation from an industry perspective and a destination perspective. And the only way to do that is to be able to access the financing. So I go back to that. We do have a team on the ground in COP right now that's negotiating and looking to see how we can triple adaptation finance by 2030, right? So it is a huge challenge, and it is not an easy thing to achieve, but we do need to be able to prepare better as small countries. And going back to what Nina said earlier, we have to ensure that the visitors that are coming to our destinations understand the importance and value that. And I think more and more that is the case. We do have visitors who want to make sure that they have less of a footprint and that they are supporting destinations, especially those most vulnerable, in ensuring that we meet these objectives. So I think collectively, both visitors and destinations together, we can make progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. So who's next? Jose Juan.
Thank you. I think that we need a shift from isolate climate action plan to unify destination-wide climate action framework that place social and environment regeneration at the center. When every actor in a destination works toward the same climate objective, measuring, reducing, restoring, and reporting together, we move from incremental progress to systematic transformation. And only systematic action can prepare tourism for the reality of a warming world. Thank you.
Thank you. And Aditi?
Yes, I think everything's already been said. I mean, I think absolutely when we're at the point of coordinated action and commitment across, all the various parts of the travel industry, that would be, where that will be success. I think for our part, when we have the right tools and are able to do our job of informing travelers around what responsible travel and tourism look like, I think that will mean that we're able to be successful from our vantage point.
Great. Well, thank you for your contributions. What stands out to me from this discussion is that the four big ideas come to life when you talk about what's already happening. So the examples you've given, help make it more tangible, and then show that this transition's already underway. And what you've also highlighted, that things are independent. We're talking about systems change. So it's about the feedback loops, it's about what we were just saying about the business case. So we need to get data, and then that data needs to lead to investment for a business case. And then investment strengthens accountability, and that accountability also needs to be downwards accountability to the community as well as upwards to those investing. And when pieces line up, then things become more resilient. But I'd like to, as promised, hand over to Jeremy as well to hear his reflections, because he's kept there thinking, reflecting. So I'm sure you have some things to share about what's come out today. And thank you again to all our panelists and for everyone watching.
Yeah, thanks, Terry, and thanks to all our panelists today. As you all were talking, there were just so many moments of, oh, okay, yeah, this idea, this comment, this. So everything that was said, I'd want to reflect back, but I think we've been doing a good job of synthesizing as we've gone along. And there's just a couple key points that I will just re-emphasize, but I do think this is a really just an extraordinary conversation, hearing different perspectives from each of you, and the place that you're coming from and is really different. But there are some through lines that I think are coming through really clearly, and I want to acknowledge that clarity in what each of you brought. So what I heard today, first of all, I think just echoes what I shared at the beginning, which is that that climate change is not a distant scenario for the world, for tourism. It's increasingly becoming a lived reality. Thank you to Nicole for and Jose Juan from sharing these perspectives from Destinations, where we're destinations, communities, and the sector have to grapple with this climate reality. Last year I was in New Zealand and had the opportunity to meet with several destination leaders, not only from New Zealand, but from the Pacific nations. And hearing some of them talk about climate reality was incredibly moving. The room was in tears hearing about some of the realities that are already being faced. I mean, migration issues and things that are so much bigger than tourism, but obviously that that affect the work that we do and also give us opportunities to help create something new, which to me is what adaptation and resilience can also be about. So we have this lived reality, and we're seeing how destinations and businesses are grappling with that and are thinking about the systems piece, so that at the end of the day, systems and adaptation are fundamentally about people, about connections and how we sort of can align to create a better security, more aligned futures and a real sense of possibility. But taken together, I think the message maybe is unmistakable. I think I heard from almost everyone that we don't have an ideas problem, we don't have an innovation problem. We do have a resource problem, but it's probably not that the resources don't exist, but that the way that we've haven't quite aligned yet to create that access to those resources in a scaled up way means that we have a coordination problem and a justice problem and equity problem. And I think those two things are really connected, because we have expertise, we have leadership, we have solutions. Increasingly, this is a sector that can define where it wants to go, much more so than 5-6 years ago, I think. So what we need now are the mechanisms and the policies and the investment opportunities or flow of investment and earmarks from policy that allow those efforts to reinforce one another and reach scale rather than sit in isolation. So I think that has to be the work of the next few years, is just aligning the incentives across the board from travelers, the communication that Expedia would like to increasingly do better and have the tools to do, all the way through to policymakers, where we need to, and donor agencies and whatnot, where we need to have aligned messaging and aligned messaging incentives and coordinated effort that will help to mobilize resources and ensure that people in places who have the least sort of buffer or are the most at risk have the most at stake are going to be prioritized. Without coordination at that sort of global scale, it becomes very difficult to make sure that those resources are both accessible and driven in the right direction. So if COP30 becomes a turning point for us, or is another milestone or moment that we can look back on, I think it's because we listen to voices like the ones here in this panel. We listened to people in Brazil, the host nation that is doing a really great job of sharing its story, and it's a really diverse, an interesting story coming from the global South, and that we began acting with that courage and fairness and real coordination. And I think if anything, I just walk away with hope that we can accomplish that as we go forward, given the great work that all of these guys are doing, and certainly many of you out there that inspire me every day. So thanks for the opportunity to listen and synthesize here at the end.
Oh, I'll speak. Sorry, Terry, I thought you might wrap up there, but well, thank you, Terry, and thank you, Jeremy, and thank you to all our panelists, Jose Juan, Nicole, Aditi, Nina. Some really interesting discussions going on there, and obviously more to come. So thank you so much for that. The news that I have from COP is that there's been a fire. So everyone's okay from what I can tell. Certainly Jeremy Smith and Virginia are both okay. But it obviously means that Jeremy, who was due to come for our next session, is unable to. We were going to talk about with him as a co-author of a new report that has been published by UN Tourism, which Virginia mentioned when she dialed in earlier, around regeneration. Regeneration as a pathway to climate and nature resilience. Obviously, we're not going to have that conversation in full now, but I would like to bring Rebecca Armstrong in, who was going to have the conversation with Jeremy, because today she has read that report, or at least briefly try to get an understanding of what is in that report. So I think now at least we can have a quick discussion about this report so that you can be aware of it. We'll put a link into the chat and then we will move on. But this is the nature of live broadcasting. So but happily, as I say, everyone seems okay in COP. I think it was just a bit of a scary moment, but I don't think it's a serious one, I hope. So if I can ask Rebecca to come up to the platform, and thank you again to the panelists from the last session, and we'll have a quick discussion about what's been going on with this new report. Rebecca, are you there? Not yet, I think. So this the new document is called Regenerative Approaches for Climate Action in Tourism. It's a draft, so it is now open for consultation. We will put the link in chat. It was co-authored by Jeremy Smith and Suzanne Becken, both people who you heard in the earlier session this morning, if you were able to attend the morning session. And yeah, hi Bex.
Hello.
I know it's tough to put you on the spot like this because obviously you're not here to talk in detail about the report. You were here to kind of pull out some of that from Jeremy himself. But as someone who has at least had some time to find out what's going on in that document, if you could just give us a quick lowdown of what's there.
That's fine, no problem. I'm really sorry not to be able to have the conversation because actually having read the report today, it was really excellent and I highly recommend it. It is a draft report for consultation, so that's the idea, that people are invited to read and comment on it. And I think it connects really well with lots of what we've heard this afternoon. The rationale behind it is looking at how regenerative approaches can support the whole the whole of climate action, really. So as Virginia referenced earlier on, regeneration is obviously a pathway of the Glasgow Declaration in its own right. It's a practical, tangible activity in terms of restoring ecosystems, etc. But it also is a whole, that shift in mindset and that shift in approach. And the report is really interesting because it dives into how a regenerative approach might shape measurement, for example, might shape decarbonisation, etc. So, how that might look differently if we had a regenerative approach to finance, for example, which is what we've just been talking about in quite some detail as well. How it might look differently if we approached governance and community involvement with a regenerative lens. So, it's a really great report. It's there for consultation. It's intended as a draft for public input and shaping together. So I would just, I think Gina has shared the link in the chat. One of the quotes that I pulled out that I really liked was about really that idea about how regeneration can humanize the process for something that might feel quite technical and scientific in many ways, and those sort of concrete measurements and data are important, but actually to humanize that process. And the quote I really liked was that each reduction target becomes a chance to rethink and remodel how tourism operates, what it values and who benefits. And I think that really, for me, kind of connected with a lot of what we've talked about this afternoon and what we've heard. There were some really practical examples in the report as well, and I know that more will be invited as part of that consultation. So please do check it out. And I'm sorry that Jeremy's not able to be here to share it himself.
Thanks so much, Bex. I didn't really properly introduce you, Rebecca. You are our head of impact at the Travel Foundation.
No problem.
And thank you so much for doing that. I keep getting distracted as you were speaking because Jeremy Smith was sending me WhatsApps, pictures of the fire and that sort of thing. It does look quite dramatic. But again, as I say, everyone's fine and everyone's been evacuated. But obviously that did mean it was something that he wasn't able to then join us on this webinar. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. We're going to kind of move towards a wrap up now. Let me just share my slides one more time. So on screen here, you can see that there's plenty that you can be taking away, I think, from this afternoon's session. There are at least 4 documents that we have mentioned, including this regenerative approaches to climate action in tourism, that you can go off and have as homework. So also, please do read our Where Next report. Please do read the Guide to Action on Climate Change, which is the document with a whole bunch of case studies related to climate action. And also, please do read Shivya's Future Proofing Tourism document, which again has a whole range of really practical examples of how businesses can adapt. So that's something for you. I mean, today, I think we've heard about the need to understand risk. We heard from Harald that comprehensive risk assessments are an essential strategy for building better resilience. And Harald stressed there are some forms of tourism that are driving up risks for destinations. So we need to understand what aspects of tourism are worth keeping and what needs phasing out. And policymakers need to carefully assess the situation for their destination. I think we also had a theme around urgency, that climate change is happening now. We heard about the heat islands in the favelas reaching 60 degrees. We heard about the flooding in Kerala, and it's also vital adaptation that's already underway. We heard about the rice that grows in saline conditions, the planting of mangroves powered by money from tourism. The solutions already exist inside communities. Connecting tourism with those communities is key. In Gopi's words, it's not about what we should do tomorrow, it's about what we should have done yesterday. We had a clear investment gap that came up again and again across the sessions. The gap between climate risk and the impacts already being felt and available finance came through really strongly. Adaptation funding is not flowing at the scale or speed required. And I think everyone here was really saying that that's the proof in the pudding. So without the funding, there's a definite key gap there. And I think we also heard again and again this need for a community-centered transition. So people were repeatedly emphasizing that climate action must protect community well-being, the social license, the local voice, the equity and fair benefit sharing. These things are all essential for any credible transition. We heard several leadership examples, including from Beyond Green in Zanzibar, about how tourism is built on multi-stakeholder partnerships and collaboration. And perhaps that's the final theme, collaboration. That's certainly come through morning and afternoon. We all know that we can't do these things on our own. We have to do them together. So this brings us to a close. Thank you so much for staying the course and listening in, particularly if you were here for the morning and the afternoon session. Well done, you. As you know, this has been recorded, so we will be sharing a link to the recording and some follow-up communications with you as registrants. So watch your inboxes for that. Otherwise, thank you so much, and let's keep an eye out still on what's going on in COP for the rest of the week, and we look forward to seeing some more news. Thank you all.